Right, we've got LS here, main colour commentator from Korea, Monty's protege, as I said. I don't know who actually would dislike that more. Who knows? We'll just leave that out there. So, right, here's the thing, LS. Normally, what we do on these shows is talk about the teams, and then we just get into obvious digressions and sidetracks where we go down super deep routes, and then usually you and the other co-host are like arguing about one specific moment in a VOD that no one's watching, and I'm like, guys, no one remembers this. No one remembers what happened at 4:35 at the Wolves. Like, no one remembers. And then you're all just going super hard. So what we'll do instead is, luckily, LS, we can actually just skip that and go straight to the digressions. So there's a lot of meta-related stuff we can talk about with you.
Wait. Before we get into the game, I've got one more thing I want to talk about first. So, LS, I saw you tweeting that you have 250 kilograms of rice for the coronavirus. What are you doing there, buddy?
Well, there's 6 of us here. There's 6 of us. So
you need 40
Monty,
kilograms of rice apiece.
You do know who LS is, right?
Yes,
everyone knows the meme, right? He wants to be Korean. That means he has to be a hypochondriac too. Like, it's just necessary. It's part of the culture. Stop disrespecting his culture.
One of the pro players' moms sent food too, and then we got a lot of food. We got a lot of non-perishables and stuff. I don't think the panic's really set in Korea yet, but some places do have like grocery stores that are getting hit.
Non-perishables, even the food you eat is scaling at this point in time. You're even going with that as a philosophy for your diet now. Okay, I see how it is.
Look, if you really wanted to eat scaling food, the clear answer is to make a giant pot of chili, because that just gets better over time the longer that it sits there. So, have you considered that?
No.
Exactly. Whereas like a kimbap, that's just sinner food. That's like you got to eat it within the first day, or it's just garbage at that point. You know?
Yeah, low effort food. Kimbap. Exactly. How much spam?
That is the topic we got to go into, though, because there's so much we can have a discussion of here. So I've seen it's been discussed on the Reddit and done the rounds already, but we haven't really gotten into this topic with you, which is this whole philosophy you have where, by the way, it's straight fire come up with different terminology.
Yeah.
You don't just want it to be a concept. You want to have a cool name that's catchy. So this like sinners versus saints concept, where for people who don't know, one of LS's preoccupations with the game for a long time has been the philosophy of how do you win the game basically from draft? Like, how can you set up such favorable conditions that if you piloted that comp, to use his terminology, you would basically have a better chance to. It's not just that you both go into the game with similar tools and then you see a win. So obviously for the last few years, you've been someone who's stressed, as a lot of the Koreans appreciate, the scaling premise, but you've now added a new dimension to it that actually plays into one of your famous idiosyncrasies, which is the idea that you should never be playing in a scenario where, like, if the opponent makes a mistake, to you, that's like, he could have not made that mistake.
Ellis is perfect game.
Exactly. So you've actually paired the two philosophies together by making, like, the scalers are the saints. They're doing the right thing. They're playing the game. They're pious. They're virtuous. They aspire to just scale through the game without doing anything. Then you have the sinners, which are obviously the people where they just abuse like Olaf or Release or something, and they just try and smash the early game. Basically Dragon X, if I'm being honest. Like, so you try and smash early, and you hope you never have to do any of that cool late game stuff, and you just win hard. So this is a basic premise you set up, right?
Yeah. The sinner thing, I don't know when that totally started. I think it was with me and Nemesis. As a means to talk about like solo queue champions and champions that it just felt like they had to play in immoral ways in order to win.
Immoral. I like how this is now an ethical question for you. This is great. His quest for the perfect game has now shaped his ethical being. It's a religion. Yeah. It's an ethical structure.
Like on your deathbed, like from like MVP Ozone has to, like, on his deathbed just before I die, like, priest, come close to me. I'm sorry I abused that final against. Like, it's not like immoral to play them, is it? Like, I know what you mean.
But yeah, so I think it started there, and then there was I don't know. There was also the term gentleman. For like champions that they're so honest because they're so slow and stupid that they just tell you everything they're going to do before they do it. And if it works, then, I mean, there was no surprises, you know? And it started there.
Who's a good example of that sort of champion then?
like Cho'Gath.
Malphite?
I think it started with Cho'Gath. We called him Honest. Because he just walks up and obviously is going to rupture you. Yeah, Malphite's another honest champion or gentleman.
Olaf probably.
Olaf has to sin. he's gonna get ahead in order to be relevant. Although, I guess Yuumi and Soraka, the meta sort of made it so that I'm less. I care less about him now, depending on some things, but. I think that's where the terms come from, and it really caught on with a lot of people, both players and casters and other analysts and stuff like that. So that was kind of interesting.
Because the good thing is there's so many different, there's so many examples from the major regions that we could literally use of teams who are getting ahead or behind, depending on which one of these they're doing. But as a more general meta concept, like, what do you think about this, Monty? Because I have to say, sometimes LS's theories, I'm sort of like, I'm not seeing it from our perspective that way that much, but I do actually agree generally that, like, it does feel like the scaling angle is the most powerful in the game right now, because stupid idiots on Reddit keep doing a straw man where they think when you say scaling, you mean like everything's like a champion that comes online at 40 minutes and until then you just get the shit beat out of you. No, you can pick scaling champions that win the fucking lane as well. So when you do both, I would agree, from the games I've seen in LCS, LEC, and over in Korea, the best teams right now, in my opinion, are the ones that can draft the champions that do fine or win in lane and then just win the game from scaling. Like, that seems to be the best. Like, that's why I almost like the angle, even though we were joking about it, that you call them sinners when they pick those comps, because I do think that the teams that pick those comps are the ones that are insecure and know, like, I better just steamroll this first 10 minutes. Or I really think that is what that is the strategy they're going with.
It's also that I think that scaling means something different than it used to, and especially this season, because soul point is so important. So the game structure has sort of been collapsed, where there's an early game and then there's a very, very short mid game, and then there's late game, either soul fights or baron fights. And compared to how the game used to be, with the truncation of the mid game and sort of the accelerate, because remember, plates are also accelerating gold gain, right? So you have ways to accelerate gold gain, herald to get plates, just getting plates yourself by putting on early pressure, and bounties. Remember, none of this shit existed when I was casting. So now what happens is, because people get to 2-3 items faster, the mid game is very short. So mid game champions that we used to see be extremely powerful, like Rumble, lose relevance much, much quicker than they used to. So scaling, I think, just happens faster. And so I agree with LS that this is it's a very interesting concept. And remember, we had LS on right after Worlds to talk about the World Finals. But that was before we had this like dragon stacking soul point thing. So in a way, we've seen this has resulted in a lot of things like Misfortune coming online, both as a lane bully and the fact that her ult is incredible in these team fights that happen at all times of the game. We don't have that many viable tanks right now. The other thing is Ornn being in the meta is also accelerating.
It's like the best champion in the game, let's be real. It's ridiculous, isn't it?
Because here's the thing, starting at level 12, right, you get Ornn buffs to items, which means you're accelerating the late game by doing that, because you're infusing thousands more gold of value into people. So I think all of these things are combining. If the question, an interesting question is, if Ornn wasn't in the meta, what it would look like, because he is the dominant champion right now. This is like the age of Ornn, right?
Yeah.
I don't even know why he's allowed through the draft. Like, that would be the first thing I would ban.
That doesn't make any. I think red side bans should be permanently. I've talked about this on the cast. I've talked about it on Twitter. I think red side bans should be permanently Soraka, Aphelios, Ornn. I think that should be pretty much locked. Because I also use this term. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but I call the pick orders now like B1, R1, R2, etc. Because I feel like it's a very easy way to help people follow through. So I think B1, Soraka's the best B1 in the game. And then after Soraka, it's Ornn. And then after Ornn, then it's Aphelios. And then after Aphelios, then you can start to have arguments on, is Misfortune better than Gangplank? And stuff like that. But I think B1 champions, they have to be either so oppressive or so strong to go into the R1, R2 of the opponents, or like I have my own little thing where I use like Magic the Gathering colors and stuff, but
yes, we know.
Yeah. So I try to break down champions into like themes.
It's actually a good concept though, Monty, because what people don't realize that why it's good terminology to use is anyone who's ever played Magic the Gathering knows that at least in the modern day, you very rarely play a single color. So what you're trying to do is make a mixture, and then that will depend what counters you. So actually, I even like the premise of dividing it up, because anywhere you're starting to build terminology in a model for something that was unspoken about before is a big deal. Like in the past, everyone just I literally talked about every champion individually. We had no themes to them, as Ellis is saying here. So it makes it really easy if you're not somebody super knowledgeable at the game to follow what he's talking about, actually.
I mean, that's one of the things that I did with team compositions back in the day, right?
Yeah. Pick comps, obviously. Yeah, exactly.
So, I think that most champions that are B1, they have to have multiple modes. They can't be too funneled into one aspect, and if they are, oftentimes they're going to be what I classify as a sinner. Because if you're too funneled into one theme, it's very hard to pivot out of that on B2, B3 without compromising the initial pick, or having it be off theme or off topic with whatever you're trying to do in the rest of the draft. And then you can experience problems. And I've talked about this obviously a lot in tweets that I've done on co-streams on LCS. Like, these champions are off theme with each other. They don't make sense. They're trying to achieve different things. They come online at different times. And then people that use the term bridge, I don't know where bridge came from. I'll be completely honest. But every single time I hear the word bridge, I just think you don't know what you're talking about. Because it would be like, Monty, I know that you played Hearthstone.
Yep.
It would be like control decks that have the really big creatures and board wipe randomly having a fucking 2-drop in there. And then the person's trying to make the argument that the 2-drop is necessary in order to get to the late game. And that's just like, holy shit, stop talking. Because you can achieve what you want to do getting to the late game with different champions. You don't need an Elise when you can have a Gragas. You don't need an Elise when you can have a Talia. You don't need... Anyway, if you get what I'm saying, AP champions that can scale, be more powerful in mid and late game, have more modes, have more gears.
Have an ult.
They might not be able to... have an ultimate. That aren't reliant on ganking at 3 camps or 4 camps or something, and reliant on getting kills, because Elise is the most sinful of all AP champions that are in the meta right now.
I love it. No, I totally I agree with you, and I think that teams do have execution that can pull it off, but that doesn't mean that it's ideal, and I think that's what people sometimes confuse about what you're saying. And I do think
it's like that famous example where Froggen and Faker were the only 2 mids in the world that thought that Karthus beats LeBlanc. And it's like, no, it only beats it if you're playing it, because you're so absurdly good at, in theory, both sides of that. If you're Faker, like, you can just do that. But if only 2 people in the world can do it, it's objectively not the best, is it?
Yeah, and I do appreciate that. And I do think the other aspect of this is that bounties are so meaningful right now that even if you die to somebody early, so let's say you're playing a less than ideal champ, and you know what, we can even go into this as an example of one of the LCK games that happened this last week, which was we had a lot of consequential ones, but one of the biggest, there are 2 big matches, and both of them were Dragon X, and one was versus Genji and one was versus T1. But if you recall, the 3rd game of the T1 versus DRX series, I don't know what Pioshik was Cuz was doing early on that Nidalee, and he just randomly dies. But dying early really is kind of irrelevant right now. It does set you behind in the jungle, but if you die in lane and you're giving over that gold, as long as you can get that kill back later, it sort of balances out in a way, or even can come back into your favor with more bounty gold, right?
Yeah.
So I think the rubber band mechanics that have been implemented into the game are causing a lot of these early game ganks to be less meaningful, is the long way to say that.
Yeah. No, and the other thing about turret plates ended up getting hit. They used to be 160, now they're 120.
Yep.
Turrets became more difficult to end up capturing. as well. And then the other thing about Rift Herald feels like a trap, in that obviously a lot of teams, they rotate for it, they group to it. One of the things I try to talk about a lot on the LCK broadcast is that Rift Herald often ends up looking like it's just a dopamine hit, in the sense that a lot of teams, even in LCS, when I'm co-streaming, I'll see it. They'll rotate like their bot lane, or they'll rotate their mid laner or their top laner, but they didn't push the wave yet. So what ends up happening is, if the enemy bot lane didn't rotate before you and they pushed the wave, if it was like a cannon wave, well, that's 200 gold that the enemy team just got that you didn't get. And then that's not accounting for the XP. And obviously the Rift Herald negates 100 of that, but it's still a net positive for the enemy team, plus 95. But if they just don't rotate to the Herald at all, and they get the next wave too, that's more golden XP that goes into that champion. So you end up using the Rift Herald, you get turret plates, but what is the actual net gain in terms of gold? And sometimes there isn't one. And that's the most perplexing thing, is you'll see these teams that seemingly misunderstand what they're trying to do. They'll rotate champions over, and then they'll actually go down in gold. And they'll go down in ultimately XP too, because they're sharing XP across several champions or something. Well, they rotate to top and use the Herald, or they'll rotate to mid. And it's just really bizarre. And I feel like people aren't looking at it in specifics, and they just rotate to Herald as if it's some godly objective. And then the other thing that you talked about earlier on with the accelerated mid game, due to the dynamic of dragons, and we enter the late game much faster, using Herald too early can also be problematic, because then there's just nothing to do. And then it actually allows champions that were in losing lane matchups or something in top lane to end up recovering. I think we saw this in the LCK a few times, where a top laner was losing really, really hard. Rift Herald got used, turret went down, and then the enemy top laner just eventually was almost even after a couple of minutes, because there's just nothing to do on the map. You can't realistically push tier 1 turrets, because they're too durable. It's too easy once tier 1 items start coming in. There's so much wave clear. The meta right now for AD
you
carries,
can just sit under the turret and farm if it's
yeah,
down
exactly,
to its last 2 plates, because it has so much armor at that point in time.
Right. So then the only real dragon, I know some people will have different opinions on this, but the only real dragon that matters is the 3rd dragon, because dragons in isolation suck. Like Infernal's a fucking joke. Mountain can be okay if you have several tanks. It can end up giving you,
but nobody plays several tanks.
Yeah, no one plays several tanks. Cloud Dragon, it's really, really fringe that it'll end up being valuable. Like, you have to have champions that don't build CDR early that also have a really key ultimate. So like MonteCristo, having access to Death Realm, because he doesn't get CDR. But then again, that's really fringe, because when is he casting it off cooldown? And then obviously you have Ocean, which is a joke because it's 2.5% missing health. So with the amount of sustain that's already inside of the game, how often are you actually getting a big kick out of it? And then how often is the kick that you're getting out of it practical inside of the game in terms of being able to be used or being able to be relevant? And I think most cases not. So the only dragon that really matters is 3rd Drake. And 3rd Drake only starts typically coming online and being contestable at like 18 to 21 minutes, I would say, in most games.
Sure.
And so at that point, these mid-rangey scaling team compositions, they are online for the most part, and they can start contesting you even if they're down several thousand in gold. So
sure, they can, but at the same time, if you're a mid-range composition and you have lost one of the first 2 dragons, your composition is not going to be online long enough to actually contest for soul point. That's what I'm saying. Like, in my mind, the mid-range comps have to get the first 2 dragons. They have to get 4 in a row, basically, is what I'm saying. Because it becomes very difficult if you've given up one of the first 2 to have a long enough window to compete for the soul point.
Oh yeah. If I think that I'm using mid range different.
Okay.
Than what you're. No, I think it's just a misunderstanding. Yeah, mid range to me is like 3.5 4 item peak and comps. If you know,
okay.
That's what I'm thinking of, like mid range. But I'm using it in like a TCG sense. I don't know how you're describing them.
Mid-game, mid-game comps would be like, 1 to 2 forums, 2 core items.
Okay. I just call those sin comps.
Okay. Yes, those.
But yeah, those. Yeah, I don't. So yeah, I agree. Those team compositions that peak at 1 or 2 items, they need to get the early dragons. And it feels like their only out is Soul Point plus Elder. But the weird thing about Soul Point is that Elder is the strongest objective in the entire game. It's so impossible to lose a team fight with Elder unless you're really special. And so you get the Soul Point, but if the enemy can hang on, because some of the Soul Dragons don't actually do that much. Like Cloud doesn't necessarily do anything for some team compositions. It really depends on what your ultimates are and how practical they are versus the enemy team. Mountain Dragon, I think we've actually seen Mountain Dragon struggle at some points because of the nature of it. It's just a small shield, added resistances, etc. Nothing that can't be whittled down or actually still just lose a team fight if you take it really badly. So it's mostly Infernal and Ocean that are really oppressive. I feel like Ocean's probably the strongest in general, but Infernal can obviously be really oppressive if team compositions poke. But then Elder is scary because even if you have the Dragon Soul, if you lose Elder, you can still lose the game. And so there's that really weird sort of out after all the hard work that you could have done.
It is hard to lose the Elder if you have the Dragon Soul. Though,
But yes,
I agree.
It is.
The execution clap that it gives you is still too crazy in my mind. But
yeah.
Right, let's do that cool thing where we tie it into some actual teams that play now and hurt people's feelings. So, LS, here's a totally not loaded question at all. So when you're talking about Sinners, Sinner champions, Sinner comps, there's a team called Cloud9 that's won every single game they play. They're 10-0. And I tell you what, LS, they must just completely defy your theory, right? Because that Blabber guy loves him a bit of a lease and lease in, and he likes to go balls deep in the first 10 minutes. And they're like one of those like pizza companies, mate. Like every game ends 30 minutes or less. If we don't get our delivery to you, you get your money back. Like that's Cloud9 right now. So are they some exception to your rule? Like they sure seem to love playing a lot of they play like Kiana or Rumble mid. There's some sinners in there, mate. There's some sinners in there.
There is some sinners in there. I'm looking back at some of their team comps just to like refresh my memory. Some of their comps, even though they have sin inside of it, this is sort of like what we were talking about at the very beginning of the show, where it feels like scaling is a misunderstood term. I remember I had this conversation when I talked about what Kabe had said about scaling, and there was that whole Reddit blow up where people just started fucking doing, the common Reddit stuff. Scaling doesn't inherently mean that you can only come online in late game. If you're just slightly stronger at later stages of the game than the opponent, then you're outscaling them. Mm-hmm. And so you can have champions that are in Korea. I don't know if you knew about this, Monty. Apparently Koreans have this term called decay, or that's the translation. Champions that decay, they fall off. So if you have, I like it. So you can have decaying champions in your team composition, but if you still have more champions that go later than your opponents, or champions that function very well against the opponent's team composition, maybe overall, then you're still outscaling them. And I think that even some of Cloud9's team compositions that might feature a Lee Sin or an Elise, that aspect is still present, where their champions are still just better than their opponents. Not all the time, but I do think some of the time that is actually the case. So even though, yes, there's Lee Sin, Elise enthusiast for Blabber, he's only played Gragas twice.
Yep. And he hasn't played anything else besides that. So
yeah, and that was usually when people banned like Elise or whatever, like
yeah.
When he had to, basically.
We've been discussing, and I know you've been co-streaming, so you have some thoughts on the LCS teams. But yes. I think what's so interesting about Cloud9 to me is that there's a reason both to be excited about Cloud9, I think, on a global stage, and also a reason to be extremely suspect. So let's start with the reason why you would be extremely suspect. What they do, basically every game, is they dominate the bottom lane with Vulcan and Sven, and they spend a lot of time with Niski and Blabber putting pressure on bot. They take the first dragon, and then at 8.5 or 8 to 10 minutes, they rotate top and take Herald. And they basically do this every single
Pretty much
game.
every single time. Their stats for that are mental. How many towers and dragons and
Here we
everything.
go.
Yeah.
So I can tell you right now, if we talk about some of the statistics before you get any deeper than this. So Tim from Oracle's Elixir, who runs the site with a lot of useful metrics, said that right now after the first round robin, so the first 9 games, Cloud9 has a 92% Drake control, an 83% Herald control. Now think about that. How do you get 83% of Heralds and 92% of Drakes when they are on opposite sides of the map? And clearly there should be some counterplay. 100% of Barons, 100% of Elder Dragons, 58.1% jungle control, which is nuts. Like, controlling nearly 60% of the jungle is crazy. 89% first tower and first to 3 towers. That is a level of objective dominance that I think is probably unparalleled in 9 games in League of Legends history. That is crazy. Yeah. But, so here's the big caveat. But everyone else in the LCS macro is so trash that it's really hard to read. Like, how can you possibly be allowing them to take a Drake and then rotate top and kill you and take a Herald and then take first tower? Like, that should not be allowed to happen. So I think part of that. Now, that's the downside. The upside is this. When I watch them team fight, they seem to all be of one mind in that what is impressive about them, and I think does translate to even opponents that know how to macro, is that when you watch how they engage and disengage, they're all moving like a school of fish, like almost perfectly in unison. They understand which abilities are up. They're blocking for each other. They understand how their team composition should operate in a team fight extremely well. That's something that will be there no matter of who their opponent is. So yes. I do wonder if they are capable of facing a good macro opponent and they've got more depth to their knowledge, because in their team fighting, I can definitely tell that they do. But they haven't been challenged in a macro sense. And so I can't tell what their contingencies are in case something goes wrong, because nothing ever goes wrong. Nothing ever goes wrong. They just get handed everything on a silver platter.
Yeah. I think that's obviously well, we don't know what's happening with MSI this year, right? Because LPL is still canceled. So I don't know when the first international showing would end up being. And this
I think
obviously...
they'll still have MSI, just maybe without LPL teams.
That'll sort of invalidate the premise, won't it?
Well,
who knows what's gonna happen with LCK
I would rather
now.
look. I would rather have that. And you're right. Maybe the LCK players will be quarantined as well. But I would rather have some level of international competition than zero level of international competition. Yeah, it sucks that the world champion region of the last 2 years might not be there, but let's still have some competition if we can. That
would be really bad. I agree with that.
So anyway, continue.
No,
tell me your thoughts on Cloud9.
So I think NA overall, not just in a macro sense, does look very weak. Even like laning and micro stuff. That's one of the things I don't know what's going on. And obviously I'm a bit harsher on some teams than I am on others, but I agree with you in the sense that it just doesn't look like there's any resistance for Cloud9. And so it's very strange, because you can have teams that it doesn't make sense why they're, well, I mean, it can make sense, but it doesn't make sense in the aspect of why are they performing so consistently badly, or what is really going on inside of their games. And then you look at Cloud9 and they're obviously so consistent at the top end right now. They're winning everything, and it doesn't seem like it matters what's going on. But the other thing about it is that even in laning phase, they're not experiencing a lot of difficulty, right? Nope. Which then spirals into macro, and then it spirals into just the flow of the entire map and the game. They have complete control over it. So in international competition, I don't think they would be favored against G2 or Fnatic or even some of the top end LCK teams or LPL. Like, I don't see anything that they have a lot of impressive stats because they're winning in so many small areas early and mid.
Well, it's also that
then
what's impressive is the discipline, though. Like, unlike G2, which can devolve into G2 just G2ing out of control and doing silly crap, right? Cloud9 doesn't do that. You know, they're extremely disciplined, and they do the right thing. That's what's so frustrating about watching them play, is because you're like, you are absolutely doing the right thing right now, but how do you have this much room to do the right thing? But they are following, like, the flow chart is followed very well and very efficiently. That's why they're closing so fast. So they know what to do as a unit, which I think is great. But again, the challenge hasn't been there, and it's not super difficult. We're not seeing some G2 level of jazz improvisational shot calling. We're seeing a very traditional checklist of objectives, and they're doing it properly. But would they play against somebody who's going to force them to improvise? That's my question, because I haven't seen that yet. I haven't seen it.
Yeah,
so I've got a couple of angles on this. Like, first of all, in terms of the whole thing of like what LS basically, he didn't finish the thought there, but when he was talking about the fact that they do so well in the early game, but when you go internationally, where if you at the moment don't even ever lose lane almost, like that's not League of Legends. Like, you're living in some bubble at the moment where somehow it's like professional wrestling where everyone's paid to lose to you, something ridiculous. Like, you've never actually played a real game yet. You're supposed to have games where you're behind in the game, where you miss draft, where the other guy gets the first herald or whatever, of course. So the big problem is on one level, there's something to be excited about there, because if they actually did end up being internationally what they are at LCS, they'd actually be one of the NA teams in history that had the best chance to do well.
Absolutely.
Because if you could actually do that stuff internationally, right now in the game, you could win a lot of games. The problem is that I'm kind of with LS on this one. Counterintuitively, that's also the type of team that is the most set up for a fall. Because what happens is you go internationally and you have all these teams that are going to... I'll just give the example of Fnatic last year. Oh, we're getting all these early game advantages against everyone we play. And then you go to Worlds and you're not even a contender. Like, you're not a team that's ever going to win the tournament. Because, guess what? Everything that you were doing all year doesn't apply when you play against Chovy in lane. When you play against, I mean, it wasn't there, but Keen in top lane or something. Like, none of this is going to be relevant at that point in time. So one of the big issues I have is I actually personally don't even think they would be the best if they came to LEC. Like, I think Fnatic does what they do, but would be better at it because they've got superior players. I think G2, the second Blabber did one of his, like after he does, my joke is Blabber does 3 kills, then he has to do an int just to like sacrifice to the gods, like to remind them like he knows who he is. The problem is
it was part of his pact with the devil to get his skills.
The problem is if you do that int against G2, that's just their door back into the game. Like, we've seen how hard it is to close them out. That's why I said on Twitter, the team I'd love to see them play is actually Origin, because there's the matchup for you. There's the Sinners versus Sits if you want it right there. LS.
Yeah, there you go.
OG matchup, right? That would be the telling one to me. If OG could really beat them just through scaling, then it's a flawed concept. If they could beat OG though, who were good players, now I'd be interested.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there has been one instance that comes to mind when it comes to Cloud9, which is that they were behind early against TSM and they wrestled control of the game back very easily. But part of that was also TSM being horrible. So
TSM's pretty good at losing leads, I've noticed.
yeah, that is so. It's such a hard read because like I said, when there's no resistance, the evaluation is tough. You can't. One thing I think that's true about League of Legends is that you can't evaluate macro in a vacuum. And I think we've learned that over the years, which is you can only macro as well as, like, you can't macro. There's a how can I put this? There's a cap to how well you can macro, and that cap is dictated by your opponent and not by you.
Mm-hmm. Put it this way, if we were playing chess and you've barely played the game and I've played the game a little bit, I might make you look stupid. Like, every move, I'm making the right decision, I'm beating you. But the point is, if I play someone much, much better than me, those same moves don't work. Like, it looked like I was in control, like I understood everything that was going on. But that was because we were both at such a low resolution understanding of the game, you know.
This reminds me of that quote from years ago. I think we actually discussed it on SI. I think I made the comment about I think old Fnatic, right? You can look really good if you're a diamond playing against bronze. In the sense that you get no resistance, nothing happens. But then if you have a diamond player play against a diamond player, suddenly all the mistakes become apparent, everything becomes obvious, and things obviously start getting punished a lot harder.
Yeah. But here's the difference, is that that's true of macro. I'm not entirely convinced that's true of like team fighting and sort of team micro, if that makes sense. So when I talk about how they're all moving together and how they're intercepting abilities, that's like a level of coordination that has to happen. It has to happen organically. So that is why I believe that Cloud9 is actually a good team that would be like at least very competitive on the world stage.
Yeah, sure.
Because I've seen that. So it's just kind of a weird thing where like macro is super hard to judge because it's capped by your opponent. Whereas the micro movement, now that's something that I think you can do no matter how, like what level of competition that you're in, because that's responding to what is happening to you very, very fast. And if you can do that efficiently, then you have a lot more of an opportunity to be successful, I think, globally.
Yeah.
So that's why I said there's sort of one upside, one downside here.
I want to ask you guys, though, here's the question, because it ties into what we were saying. That's also my biggest problem with the Cloud9 angle, is think of any dominant team in NA in the past. So Team Liquid last year, the last 2 years would be a good example, right?
Yes.
If people wanted to criticize them, well, at least Team Liquid could say, hey, you know what? We have Cloud9 here. We have a good TSM team here. And we beat those teams. We're better than them. Therefore, that shows we have competition, that what we're doing is legit. The big problem right now is, I said this on Twitter, and I defy anyone to argue against it. The level of, this is the joke. I can't even say the name, which is what I'm going to ask you. The level of whoever you're picking is the second best team in NA. Because right now, even if you're going to tell me it's FlyQuest, it's like, how touch and go is this, for fuck's sake? So whoever you're picking out of the 4 or 5 teams that could be the second best right now, that has to be the worst level of second place team I think we've ever had in the LCS. Like every other year, there would always be like so legit, like 2 or 3 big contenders, wouldn't there? There would always be like people where like they can all mix it up, but they're all going to beat the people below them. At the moment, positions 2 to 6 is just like who plays who on what week. It's a crapshoot. The draft holds massive sway over it. Like, so whoever you'd pick, the problem is you actually do need like a legit contender to beat in order to get your props as a winner. Like that's just the way sports is, unfortunately. So who would you guys pick? Who would you put forwards as the second best LCS team? I feel like there's a lot of angles you could go with on this. Because the problem is in the standings, like it is FlyQuest, but I'm sorry, LS, I'm not trying to hate on anyone in FlyQuest. Poor little Santorin hustling away while Turtle's still playing. Great smile, really cool guy. I'm not hating on any of these guys. I'm just saying
they also finished a week with where they played Golden Guardians and CLG. So
I'm just going to say if FlyQuest is the second best team, I don't think we even need to have that debate, but with a Cloud9's good enough on it. Like, there has to be more. Please, there has to be more. Like, that's a placeholder if I ever saw one.
I think, I actually think it's TSM.
It's either TSM or at least this
TSM
week.
For the first 15 minutes.
I think it's TSM or it's Dignitas, depending on their draft. Why?
Depending on their draft, okay.
Yeah. It's Dignitas depending on their draft, or I think it's TSM. TSM has had some bad drafts and been in winning positions and then managed to obviously lose. But I think TSM's players are actually all pretty good. And
their roster's pretty legit.
Yeah, their roster is pretty legit. And I think that some of the games that they lost were winnable through simple fixes, not like big issues, in spite of their draft. Even just looking at some of their matches, obviously they lost their game to FlyQuest, and I think I actually had tweeted like a timestamp it. I don't remember what exact time it was at, but I think TSM had almost a 7,000 gold lead, but I said that FlyQuest was actually even or like ahead because of team composition, and that's just a mindfuck of a thing to consider. And I mean that goes to speak about the things that we talked about super early on in this, about drafts and about edges that can be obtained inside of draft, as well as just scaling team comps. But TSM, I mean, obviously there's a world where they win that game. I don't think TSM's really that bad. I also think Broken Blade is doing phenomenally. All things
at the moment, yeah, he's been pretty good.
Broken Blade has been a rock for their team in general. And
Dardoch gets a million leads as well. Like,
yeah, they have early advantages, which is huge, right? Early advantages are so meaningful right now in League. Yes. So I think that I do agree that TSM has less to do. As long as they can get better at converting those early leads, they probably would have a better record. Like they probably would be like 8-2 right now.
Yep.
There was also the question of what's up?
Who's your pick?
TSM, I think as well. I think that they definitely have the highest potential. Like they have the highest ceiling out of the other teams besides Liquid, and Liquid at least looks like they're doing slightly better. They still went 1-1 this week, but their game
I can
last
give them
night
a
against
break for now.
yeah, their game against Dignitas
signal.
was pretty clean by Team Liquid last night. You probably didn't see that yet, LS, but you were streaming it. What did you think?
Yeah, I streamed yesterday. Yeah, I missed the day before.
Okay.
I was well, I mean, I'm still sick right now. I don't have corona, but I was coming down with something, so yeah.
That's definitely not corona.
It's not corona.
How can you be sure?
I don't have. Well, I mean, I guess I can't be totally sure, but I don't have any of the symptoms.
That's a good start.
Yeah, I don't have of the main corona symptoms.
Good.
That usually everyone else has. Yeah.
Well, still time. Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
Wow.
Now I'll be really sad if you get it though. That's the problem.
What the fuck?
What do you actually think about Team Liquid though? Yeah, what are your thoughts there? Because obviously, like, it is too early to judge Brox. He did just literally get it, but we discussed this on past episodes. The problem is, it
Never
wasn't just that they had Churnfire that they were losing those games. Like that wasn't the only reason. There were definitely other problems in their team.
I feel really bad for Churnfire, because I feel like that's gonna be a mark on his career that's not really fair, to people that don't go back and look at games, and so I feel bad about that. But also, I mean, Team Liquid just looks really lost in so many aspects. From watching all of their games, it feels like. I don't know how to totally describe it. That when like the elite players of a region just stop being elite, like they don't do all the same stuff. And this is like the fall from grace Smeb had. Monty, I don't know if you followed that, but Smeb just became one of the worst top laners in LCK, and then he dropped out, and now he's on break or something, right?
Well, he went from bad to good to bad again.
Yeah. So Smeb just he swung.
He is the only Long Panda Memorial Trophy recipient who has actually become a really good top laner later on.
Yeah. So TL just, it feels like everything's just off for them, and then I think that we saw this last year, where if TL didn't have advantages, they looked really weak. They were so used to just having edges because they had the best players basically in every role, or they had like the top three at least, arguably, in every position, except for jungle, I guess. But now it seems like TL doesn't have necessarily the best players in every single position, or even top two or top three or whatever. So it's looking so bizarre watching their games, because this is not just a byproduct of jungle changing. Absolutely not the problems that are happening in top lane, mid lane, bot lane, etc. Not the problems that are happening in mid game rotations or anything like that. And this isn't a byproduct of Dragon Souls or anything of that nature. So TL's in this really weird limbo, and I don't know what to say about it, because on paper they should be better than the middle of the pack teams, but
their team last year would love this meta. This would be amazing for last year's lineup, wouldn't it?
Yeah, so it feels like they got it's like when a top player gets lazy or something. When a top player stops doing all the things that are making them top players. I don't know how to like really describe this. I'm struggling to.
You know, one of the things that
I don't want to say complacent, but yeah, go.
I think one of the things that's interesting is that if I look at Double Lift's career, it almost feels like, because remember when he took that break for one split like a couple years ago? I think he should have taken a break this split. I think that
some would say he has.
Some would say he has. That's true.
Just during the fucking games, unfortunately, when he plays center, you know.
Goes on autopilot, turns his brain off. His fingers are still clicking. I think that knowing him, he's a very competitive player, and I think that playing for no stakes affects him, which is what we're talking about with the spring split. And I think that he
has also won the most titles in history. So it's not like, even though, yes, one more is cool.
Yes.
It's not like he's the guy who's never won the championship, you know. I can certainly see why the motivation isn't crazy for spring split.
Yeah. And I also just remember that he spent an entire split streaming, and he was really revitalized when he came back. And I feel like he just needs a break. And I feel like this was the perfect time to give him a break, especially because of all the Broxa nonsense, because that it doesn't really, I guess, matter as much. Here's the thing that people don't respect is that even if you don't go to MSI, so what happens when teams go to MSI is that many of the other teams just take a break. Here's an idea for you. You also go to the region where MSI is being held and you boot camp, because you are the perfect opponent, because you can scrim anyone because you're not going to be playing them, right? So if you are a good team, you will be in demand as a scrim partner. And I would love to see more teams take advantage of that. And I think that if you kind of took your foot off the pedal and brought Broxa in, and maybe let Double Lift take a break, or whatever, what have you, anyone else who needed to take a break during spring split, develop some of your academy players, and then you go to MSI and you're like, okay, for us, the season starts now. And you should have confidence because of the level of veteran players that you have. You know that they're gonna what their abilities are, and that they're gonna be able to catch up pretty quick.
Yeah.
So that's what I would do if I was TL.
Mm-hmm. I don't think we'll ever get teams that do this though.
Probably not. Especially because, like one of the things I learned years and years ago in League of Legends, which is the nightmare, is not only in the game are people a prisoner of the moment. Hence why we've had that same rant for the last 7 years about why is the team that could side lane just team fighting in the mid lane? I'm just done with that whole discussion at this point in time. It's because people are just a prisoner of the moment in the game, or when someone has the superior scaling comp and they just unnecessarily fight at a moment where it's like, if you just don't fight for the next 5 minutes, you win the game, but they do it anyway.
Oh, that happened
in the same sense, though, I feel like people do that in the split. It doesn't matter how many times you tell people it's only the spring split, just ease up and then, build into the playoffs. They still treat every week like it's life and death. The scrutiny, even from fans, everyone is like, oh, I'm 0-2 this week. Everyone just goes, they overreact to it, unfortunately. They can't pace themselves, basically. They can't peak at the right times.
Yeah.
Should we pivot then and talk about LEC, a region where there are multiple teams that can all compete for the top?
Sure. I didn't get a chance to catch many LEC games this week because I was out of town and was catching up on LCK otherwise. But yes, we can do that.
Right, LS, I already hinted at it earlier.
Are you co-streaming LEC as well? I'm just curious. Sorry.
Do you ever do that?
So I don't co-stream LEC.
The hours are probably bad, right?
Well, the hours are actually good for Europe. It's that I can't. The viewership's dramatically different. I get 33% or 40% viewership compared to NA co-stream.
It's in the morning in Korean time, LEC.
LEC is actually, no, it starts in the night. It starts at
that's
12.
The middle. Yes, that's the middle of the night.
It's actually really good.
Well, it's
because the majority
it's good for you with your sleep schedule, but yes.
Yeah. The majority of my viewer base and follower base, I believe, is Europe. Is actually European. So it's actually really bizarre. It's
we just like toxic people.
No, but so I watch every single Fnatic game. For obvious reasons.
Just so then Nemesis can come on later and tell you why it wasn't his fault. Yeah, I know.
No, there you go. So I watch every single Fnatic game. I would say that I watch probably 1/3 of LEC games, but select ones. I don't watch all of them. But yeah,
because I alluded to this earlier, right? Even though, listen, there are certain players on that team that I don't think anyone's a huge fan of. As a team, OG must be your dream team right now, mate. They're doing exactly what you'd want of a team in the meta.
Yeah, Origin's drafting. Origin's drafting pretty well. I think Fnatic has had also some really good drafts. And then I think that there's champions that I like that are being picked up, and there's people that just don't know when to pick them. I think a really good example of that is SK. I think SK is all over the place with their drafts. That it just doesn't make any sense because you can draft really strong champions, and if you pair them with absolute shit, then you're gonna again, you're going to get off theme. You're going to have champions trying to do different things, achieve different things, and then it's just going to clump together in a very weird way. Yeah, Origins drafts are nice. I remember the Karthus one that a lot of people had tweeted at me. I thought that was a really good one. Some of Fnatic's more recent drafts have been good. Some of G2's has been okay. Yeah, that's my perspective. Europe is definitely a lot more interesting for me to actually watch than NA, because it seems like they're also willing to try and do stuff more than NA will. Does that make sense?
In what regard? Give us an example.
Champion picks in general. Right. Champion picks in general, and just overall the play is a bit more enticing. Whereas NA, I don't want to say that it devolves into the ARAM, because I think every single region has their version of the ARAM right now, even the LCK. But yeah, I think the champion picks and the spots where they come in the draft, I think is more interesting. I think it takes Europe less time to react to a potential new meta pick than any other region right now.
They also don't
obviously.
They also don't play like cowards like the LCK teams do. There is no rush 20 no rush 20. As a StarCraft enthusiast, watching Korea these days reminds me of like when you go on BattleNet and Brood War and you'd be 10. Well, you'd be much younger than that, LS. I don't even know how old you were when StarCraft came out. So when I was like 12, I would go on to BattleNet. And I would go to the games, and I would go like no rush 20 minutes, big game hunters, infinite resources, where there's just this tacit agreement that you're going to have 8 people in big game hunters on the map, and then no one's going to rush until 20 minutes, and it's just a free for all after that. So that is what LCK reminds me of these days, and I appreciate that Europe has the cojones to actually engage and play a little bit more scrappy.
Well, it's like that comment that, I forget who it was who said this. It was someone on Twitter said like a week and a half ago. They made a comment where it was like, when you watch LCK, you think actually like, this is supposed to be the highest level of the game, because their comment was like, even the bottom LEC teams know that if you're just getting wrecked in a game, you got to do something. You basically, I think the comment said, you basically have to int. Like you have to basically risk losing the game even harder to get a chance to get back in. Whereas in LCK, it's like they're just like that meme of like, oh, could I please come back in the game? And they're like, no. And they're like, understandable. Have a nice day. Like, what are you doing? Like, you can't just slowly lose the game. Can you? Like, give me a break. It's like, that's what it's like in some of these games. That's why, again, to pivot, the team that is so an outlier to the rest is Dragon X, right, LS? Because they just try to go balls deep at the beginning.
Well, sometimes
except within the context of Korea, to be fair.
And also sometimes that ends hilariously. Like, I don't even know. I want to talk specifically about that game 3 of the T1 DRX series, because it was so weird. Everything about that game was very strange in terms of Cuz's like feeding invade to start the game, and then Dragon X just like randomly baroning and then losing at the end. It was the whole experience was very strange to watch.
It was something. It was definitely something. Dragon X also seems like the most tilty team in the LCK, despite
they have 2 rookies.
They do have 2 rookies, but I feel like the person that's actually tilting the most and just donking off is actually Deft. Yeah, it's Deft, which is so bizarre. And then also, even when the camera pans to him, I'm actually, I don't know if I'm overanalyzing it. I tend to look at the player cams a lot to see reactions, because I think that certain players obviously show certain reactions. Seems like Deft is more visibly tilted this split than I've ever seen him in the past, whenever player chems end up going to him.
What was the game that they played versus Gen G where they like giga tilted because they were just randomly feeding for most of the game at that point in time?
When they played Gen G, it was ridiculous because they won the first game, and then the last 2 games, Gen G was just like stomping them the whole time. It was ridiculous. Like I think Gen G was like 10-0 on kills, like 8-0 on kills. Like, what's going on here? Like,
yeah, it was.
You're not even in this match.
Oh, it was the last one. It was game 3 because of all the skirmish that happened in the bot lane where the Galio came down, and it was just a complete clown fiesta.
Funneled in like ants.
I just wonder what is going on in the LCK, because like a lot of these games are mega clown fiesta. So what happens is in these games is like a clown fiesta will occur, whether it's in the SKT DRX game. It's like the random invade where Pyosik just feeds as Nidalee. You were flabbergasted because not only did he feed, but he wasted flash. Like the Rakan's just coming over the wall for free, and he's just dying randomly. So he like dies, gets behind in the jungle, wastes his flash, and then somehow DRX throws at Baron, right? But in the meantime, everyone's too afraid to actually do anything, right? It's like, oh, we're behind. So as Thorin was saying, we'll just stay behind. Our gentleman's agreement is.
Yeah, I don't know what I don't know what is going on. And there's also the weird thing in the meta right now, where obviously it's no surprise that Korea's meta moves slower than every other region. And so LCK is like this really weird. I've actually been struggling casting it because I don't want to. Obviously, Atlas and I and me and Valdez, we have like the lull state where we just talk about random stuff. And I don't want to do that all the time. But then I feel like if I were to actually analyze what's going on, it's just going to become constant negativity.
Yes.
And so I feel so pigeonholed in some spots where I know that after some of the casts, I go back to the producer and she's fantastic. At giving like feedback and answering questions on like how the cast is and did we go too off the rails or anything like that, and I know that after some casts I've gone back and I vented to her like I don't know what the fuck to do in these games, but I don't want to go on a tirade, but it's like it's I don't want to say the words depressing watching the game. I know that Korean casters are frustrated too. I just don't know what the fuck is going on. I really have no idea.
I've got a question along these lines. Hey, go on.
The interesting thing is, in terms of the meta, I talked to, I don't want to say what team, I talked to one of the trainees of one of the LCK teams prior to them going into the scrims and stuff. We talked about draft. And we talked for probably a good 30 minutes. Can walk them down all these lines and get them to agree on certain things, like that would be ideal, or this is a winning draft spot, or like it would be really hard to lose in mid game or late game and stuff like that. And mostly we're talking about like support counter picks, because right now LCK is just fucking Braum, Nautilus, Tom, handshaking, fucking I don't know, but they agree with all this thing, and then I see them load into a lobby and go into a custom. And then I mouse over it and I'm like, it says he's playing fucking Tom Kench again. And I'm like, I spam him with question marks. And then he just says coach. Like, oh no.
What I love about the LCK right now is that, so before they were unwilling to take any risks. And now what happens, and to me this season, that DRX Gen G game where the Galio Clown Fiesta in the bottom happened, which was just horrible. Like it was just atrocious. And then DRX just tilted. So it's like this. The way it feels to me is that it's the equivalent of you make one mistake. Like they're willing to opt into like one clown fiesta, and then the rest of the game is playing cautiously until you lose. Right? Yes. So it's like you will take one risk per game. So it's like being a teenager and being in your first shitty relationship, and then you're just like, well, I'm just never having sex again, and then you just walk slowly into the sea. I just like, what? Like you have to try at least later on.
This is why I do feel like it has to come from the coaching staff. Like I notice in most of the discussions we've had, Ellis, the last couple of years, it mainly comes down to like either the coaching staff's model of the game is off from everyone else, or they don't know how to coach like the current version of the game when they're still trying to coach the game from 4 years ago. Because one of the things that's so whack is if you go and look at those top European teams you're talking about, most of those teams are willing to mix it up big time in a game. Like they're embracing when there's a risk, because the logic is there's a risk, but there's a reward with it as well. Like if I can actually get the better of this really chaotic situation, then I lead in the game. I now have the tempo, as that dreaded term was used. In Korea, it's like unless they can see and map out all the flow chart of what's going to happen, it's like, right, it's like the best example ever would be if you think that, like, unless you can think of the perfect thing to do, you shouldn't do anything. Like in that scenario, like the classic saying is like the perfect is the enemy of the good. Like you can't have perfect information in this night, especially not the way the game's played now. I mean, some of the champions like have so much variability they can bring to the game. How are you ever going to map out what's going to happen? You've got to just take some of these risks.
It's so surprising. And you talking about the coaching, I know that it's something that we've talked about before on previous shows. I think so in my own personal experience, both having coached a Korean team now, but also having interacted with players much more in the last 2 years than I ever had previously, and knowing what goes on in NA and EU, I think Korea internally, or like structure-wise internally inside of teams, Korea is actually very, very far behind NA and EU when it comes to internal team aspects. Most of the strategical aspects of the game are all driven by players. It's only the players. It's literally the players versus the players. And coaches are generally, what it seems like anyway, glorified managers. And it's just the most perplexing thing to me. And there's a few coaches that I think aren't like that. They try to actively still sort of play the game and try to be high MMR highish MMR. And I think that they still try to like innovate and think about things that they can do. Like Hanwha Life is actually doing a lot different than any other LCK team. And I don't think that it's a surprise that it's Nofei that is attached to it. And even when Afrika was doing all their really weird stuff and they were trying a lot of experimentation, they were doing all different things, it was Nofei again. And I don't think it's a coincidence that his teams are always the ones that seem to be standing out. But I think the LCK in general, because it's so player-driven, because the players are influencing so much, and because the drafts, it really just looks like, obviously I can't know this for absolute certainty, but some of the mic checks, the players are deciding what they want to play in a vacuum. Like, oh, my champion's good against this champion, let me pick it. And there's a total disregard for how it slots into the draft with his teammates, or anything else like that. And it's a complete fucking mess. So
I've got a question.
Yeah.
Who would you guys pick? Monty, you go first on this one. Who do you think is the best Korean team? You hinted last week it might be T1. Are you staying with T1?
So here's a weird opinion. I think T1 is the best Korean team in that I believe that they are very consistent in their play. Yes. I think Afrika Freaks has the highest ceiling. I think if I look at the players that they have and I look at when they win games, I feel better about them than I do about other teams.
I could agree with that. Mystic has been having off games the past.
Yeah, but I know he can be really good.
He's a stud when he's on, though.
Yeah, he's a stud when he's on. Yeah, Keen is maybe the best player.
Might be the best player in the world.
Yes, he might be the best player in the world. You could make that argument. I like the way that they've been playing with Spirit, especially on some of the scaling junglers like Karthus. So even though they haven't had the same level of consistency as some of the other teams, I just feel more confident in their long-term potential. Yeah. Dragon X makes
you want to put your chips on Fly? You want
to
put
that is the one.
He's all right. He's already ever been all right as well. The best thing about him is
crap.
He's a guy. If everyone tells me he's terrible, I'll say definitely not. Like, look, he's competent. But the problem is, like, he shouldn't be in a team this good. Like, some of his teammates, like Keen and Mystic, deserve a better mid laner.
They also lost to KT this last week, which is the worst team in the league. So
that's pretty disgraceful. Here's my take on it. Like, I can see why you pick at T1. Like, they've had the most impressive victories. It's not an unfair one to pick.
Yes, I mean, Genji should be the best on paper.
Genji has the best roster. That's the thing. Like, I think like their roster is straight fire, and I do think if they get it together, they could be the best. The problem with Afrika and Dragon X is like they're just really flawed rosters. Like Dragon X has a couple of absolute bangers.
They have two rookies
in depth, like straight fire. The problem is like if you know the way that team was put together with the whole CV Max drama, that team was never supposed to exist. It exists because of some weird happenstance, and then they put a bunch of other players around the stars. Then you go and you look at a Freak of Freaks, like they also have a couple of absolute banger players, but then at other spots they have some weaker players. Or like I feel like both those lineups, they can only go as far as those super good players take them.
So let me put it this way though: if we think about how the meta is shaping up right now, and the way that, so for example, the way Cloud9 plays with a lot of roaming into the side lanes from the mid and sacrificing mid. Now, if I'm Africa, and I think that if I opt into that style of play and I can get Mystic and Keen ahead, I'm feeling really good. I don't think in this meta you need a truly great mid laner. You can be a support mid laner right now.
To be fair, that was always Fly's style of play.
Exactly, the Aurelion Soul.
Go to mid or bot lane, that does work.
The roamer.
Yeah, so I actually think in this meta, Africa does have a very high upside. I think Dragon X is good, but I will never put my chips on a team where you have 2 rookie players heading into their first playoff. I won't do that. I mean, even if we look at a player like Faker as a rookie, he didn't win a title in his first split.
I mean, there's been some pretty sick rookies though in their first splits. Yeah.
But as a general rule, it's a pretty good rule.
As a general rule, yeah.
Like, you can pretty much rely on rookies to just crumble in the playoffs, can't you? Like, it's just the way it goes.
And also, especially at important positions that are, like, support and jungle control the macro. And so if you freeze up in a playoff game as support or jungle, then you have no comms and you have no map control. So, I don't know.
Where do you come down on Gen G then, LS? What do you think of them?
Gen G's interesting. So I have different takes on all the teams. I think Gen G is pretty solid. They're up there with T1 in terms of their overall consistency. And then obviously Dragon X. I think Dragon X, if Dragon X handicaps themselves in draft almost all the time, it's pretty insane how consistent it is. And I remember in 2019, I talked about this with Griffin all the time. It was insane to me. I wanted to take a hammer to my skull. How consistently Griffin would have losing drafts and be forced to overcome it. And I mean,
do you think it comes from CV Max then? Because it's the same guy.
I would have to say, yeah, right. It's the only thing I can fucking speculate at this point, right? Because everything that ever comes out from interviews as well as like player stuff is that he rules with an iron fist in a way, right? So
yeah, sure.
No, I mean, obviously, I mean in the sense that
yes, of course. Yeah,
I'm not alluding to like the drama.
I just wouldn't use like any terminology of fists, like, you know, really harshly, like beating. You know, wow, he's a real slave driver. I mean, no, I mean he just whips him in the ship. No, he never does that. I mean, he's very strict on them, but just with words, like, come on, man, give me a break. Like, I get what you mean, though. Okay.
All right. So it's.
But you're implying if they had better draft, like what this team could be right up there, they would leap up.
I think they would have won some of the games that they ended up losing, because even in the game that was a tragedy, the most recent one against Gen G, where they were funneling in like ants, they still managed to almost turn team fights down, massive kill deficits, and with a worse team composition. So that was pretty interesting. I think Chovy, I'm going to make a lot of people angry. Chovy's still the best mid in LCK.
I wanted to ask you
Does
about
that make
this,
people angry?
Listen,
who disagrees with that?
Listen, we need to have an intervention about this. We need to have an intervention about this, LS. Because here's the thing, right? I think, like, one of my curses in this world is from doing so many interviews over the years. I think I'm often able to, like, get myself into the thought processes of the person I'm talking to. Therefore, I tend to be able to understand people a lot better, or I can translate what they're saying. So I get why you like Chovy, right? Like, he's obviously super mechanically sick. He's a really good laner. If he gets his champion, he gets ahead. He's going to dominate the game. But a lot of people would complain that he is, like, outside of laning scenarios. Is he that good?
He also tilts really hard.
No, so yes, Choky hasn't shown up though in LCK so far. Choky's been missing. I feel like on the Ziggs game, he was like, he's the guy that the house is on fire. Stupid.
I was getting, dude, I just hear you getting more and more mad through the cast because of you're like, well, Ziggs is just going to outpoke the Nidalee. I'm like, yep, Ziggs will have more items, lower cooldowns, better area control. And so they're just, I can't believe they lost that game. I can't believe it. It's so dumb.
I fucking can't, man. I can't. But no, I think he's actually really held it together. He looked like the only stable rock in a few of their games, like trying to put the fire out. So I think that's actually pretty good. And I don't know what could be causing that, because again, Deft, who you would think is probably like the emotionless player that doesn't experience tilt, he looks like he's tilting, like physically, more than I can ever recall in past splits.
He's literally sideways. Like
that is actually so brutal as well,
Yeah.
because like what he did last year was, it's not as extreme, but it was like comparable to when Teddy used to be on Janair. Like the team he was on last year had no business doing anything. He was still a monster.
Yes.
Like that guy was still really good. So you'd think when he gets this team, this should be the dream. Like now it's a chance to really compete. You've got a coach who's been to the finals a bunch of times. You've got another superstar next year. This should be Deft's time. Like this is the team.
Yeah. No, this should be the team. And so spring doesn't mean anything outside of MSI, right? So we still have, I think, a lot of time until summer, and we can end up seeing what's going to happen. Also, there's always mid-season roster swaps that can end up happening.
Yeah, you never know when you're going to get a pole belter on your team.
Yeah, there you go, right? So you never know what's going to happen. I don't think that we're going to see anything super big.
100 Thieves be out there like, can we get a pole belter? Can we have a pole belter? And then Papa Smithy's out, we've got pole belter at home, brings out Rioma. It's like, that's oceanic pole belter. I wanted real pole belter, Mom.
Oh my God.
Upside down pole belter.
Exactly.
Oh my God. Jesus. No, that's
Here's the thing I'll say. Fair play to Papa Smithy, though, because at least he did do that tweet where he basically said, like, yeah, we've done really badly, so hold us accountable, fans. He didn't make an excuse, did he? He didn't
No, he doesn't do that.
Yeah,
but it is funny. He's like, this Oceanic mid laner could be anything. He could even be Poe Belter. And Poe Belter's just like, exactly. I'm a coach on Team Liquid now.
Now he's on CLG. Oh, jeez.
No.
Well, there's one thing a sentence you never thought you would ever hear said out loud, LS, right? Which I'd love to just travel back in a time machine now, jump out like right after season 6 Worlds, the one that Samsung lost, but where Crown was a monster, and just tell you, by the way, in a couple of years, Poe Belter replaces Crown as a starter in the LCS. You're
on the worst team in the LCS, on CLG.
Your brain would just start melting down like, oh, I'm melting. You wouldn't even be able to handle it.
Right.
No, it's just too surreal.
Yeah. On the plus side, 100 Thieves has rescued Someday from their academy roster, and now he is just playing ridiculously well.
Let's be real. That guy's consistency over his career is top notch. Like, it's so
he's really good.
So rare.
I think he's the best top laner in the LCS right now. The games that 100 Thieves wins, he is just mega hard carrying, and they're actually playing around him. We saw him play on the Lucian this week and just split push their way to victory. I in my conversations with Papa Smithy, says that Someday is extremely good in comms in game and is like the heart of the team, basically leading the macro right now, and it shows. And he's taking a lot of the resources, but he's actually carrying the game. So that's a super valuable resource I think 100 Thieves has.
I think Someday's ability to remain at his level while being in NA as long as he has is also impressive.
It's bonkers.
He hasn't atrophied.
No, it is. Yeah, he hasn't experienced that yet. So that's that is definitely something. But I mean, 100 Thieves, they have so many issues plaguing them right now. And obviously, I mean, we talked about Ryoma. I don't think Ryoma's ever won a lane. I think that's something I've talked about on my coach streams. It feels like he's always losing. Like, do you know what I mean by that? Like, not just outright losing, but it feels like you have an auto-filled mid laner. I don't know how to describe it. That's actually what it feels like watching the games. So you have an auto-filled mid that he's playing a mid lane champion.
Right, Riot, you've gone too far with the matchmaking system now. What? Just because I get a bunch of like Korean champions, like 1,000 LP challenger players, now we get auto-filled with Oceanic players. That's just unreasonable. Like, you've gone too far now. Like, this is too much.
The way that Ryoma plays is like he's in a 1v1 in isolation without anyone else on the map. That's what it looks like to me, is that he doesn't know when to roam. He doesn't know how to play mind games on the map. He doesn't know when the jungler's going to gank. He's just there in an ARAM in a 1v1.
I have no idea. Yeah, I have no idea. I have no idea what's going on. So I mean that's 100 Thieves. Back to the LCK. Like, back to the LCK before we get dragged into that.
A tragic segue that now exists.
What do you think about Freaks? You didn't say much about Freaks yet.
So Afrika's really interesting. I actually think Keenan in his last series did a lot better, but he was struggling in every other series before that. He was actually getting carried most of the games. Like, he had terrible. I mean, he had terrible stat lines. But stats aren't always indicative of performance. But he definitely looked like a bit of a liability. I would agree that he's still one of the best top laners in the LCK, top 3. Even when he's slumping, he's still top 3. I think the best top in the LCK. I don't think it's close. I think it's Summit.
Even though I think he's black ass team, but whatever, fair enough.
Yeah, he's on Sandbot. Summit is I don't think there is any other team that I recall in recent memory, because even Keen in previous seasons, when he was the star player and he was standing out, he still had better teammates than Summit has right now. The polarity between Summit and his teammates is very akin to like Teddy on Jin. I think that's the last time I've seen something so gross in terms of discrepancy. So I don't know how he ended up staying on Sandbox during off season. I don't know what T1 missed out on, or what Gen G missed out on, or what.
That is the weirdest part, isn't it? Think about how strong top lane can be right now, and yet the two best Korean teams have whack top laners.
It's so fucking weird.
And Khan went to just go ruin the synergy.
Khan just went somewhere.
Went to ruin the synergy on FBX. He is a double agent. He is a Korean double agent that was sent by SKT to ruin FunPlus Phoenix.
Jesus. Oh, shit. Oh man, no, I have no idea what's going on, because wasn't T1 trying to pursue the Shy? I believe so. that was part of the off-season rumors. So I have no idea where all these big teams in LCK dropped the fucking ball by not trying to just get Summit. And I don't want to believe it's that he wouldn't move. I don't want to believe that at all, because Sandbox had an entire mix-up with the roster.
And they didn't go to Worlds. They didn't win any championships. Like, it's not like he had the success that would like justify it, you know?
Yeah, I think if you were to break apart every single LCK team and start from scratch, I think you slot him in top in most cases, actually, as your top pick, and then it would be Keen. So I don't know. And then it's really sad. LCK doesn't have Provio unless you have T1 5G or something this season or something. So I feel like people can't really see how good he is because I don't believe that he streams. So it kind of sucks. But he's an absolute monster, and I know that Korean players feel the same way. That,
by the way, who was your pick for the best team then? You didn't actually say yours.
I think it's really hard. For me, it's between T1 and Dragon X. Dragon X, I think if Dragon X has a winning or even draft, I would choose them over any other team. But if they have their donk drafts like they typically do, then I think they're below T1. Because at T1, I think the majority of the split so far, they've actually had losing drafts and they've still won. There were so many games that it went the distance, and then they ended up winning team fights despite. I
thought their drafts versus Dragon X were actually quite good.
Their more recent week drafts were good. Their more recent, yeah, they had double Ornn mid. That was good. They had double Ornn mid. They picked Soraka.
MS.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, did you? I don't know if you saw my tweet or something. There's a lot of Korean pros that think Soraka's bad, and then I just wonder, what the fuck are you looking at? when you watch the game, what the fuck?
Do they mean when it's not top lane or something? What do they mean?
No, just in general. There was a clip that I had tweeted out where one Korean pro streamer, but there's a lot of other, like, because LCK is co-streamable in Korea for Koreans. So there's a lot of pros that will co-stream it. There's a lot of personalities and analysts that will like VOD review and do stuff. There's an overwhelming amount of people that think Soraka's not good, and I just don't know how the fuck we ever arrive at this conclusion.
So here's my theory. When you play cuck style, which is what we'll call LCK, which is where you fall behind and then you just watch the other team have their way.
LCK stands for Le Coq.
Le Coq.
Right, okay.
Where so here's how it goes. Cuck style is when you start to fall behind and then you just sit there and you watch someone else have their way with the object of your affection, whether that's a Drake or a Baron. If you play cuck style and you never take damage because you're just watching and never fighting, then Soraka doesn't do much, does she?
Well, Soraka, I would say she's a hyper carry in the sense that if Soraka gets to 2-3 items, it's so hard to lose a team fight. I don't know how you can lose. No,
my point is if you're just watching other people take it and never taking damage, then you don't need to heal. So she appears to be bad. If you're playing cuck style and not fighting, then yes.
Look, if you want to see proof of Soraka's power, just watch the game CLG1.
Indeed.
That's all you're gonna. That's all you're gonna do.
All right, I think we're gonna take a quick break here for the Cloud9 roundup. Get us a chance to go to the bathroom, get a drink, etc. We'll be back with more of the 9 Summoning Insight right after this.
Howdy there, buckaroos and buckarettes. Welcome to another edition of Cloud9 Roundup, where we bring you all the latest Cloud9 news. First up, Cloud9 is on Weibo now, so if you happen to be into that Chinese social media, well, head right on over and check us out, right on Weibo. Second up, Rainbow Six Hetty has decided to leave the Cloud9 roster. We wish him best of luck in the future. On the streamer front, we are proud to welcome Vienna to the Cloud9 family this year as a streamer. So welcome, Vienna. We'll be seeing more of you on Twitch. Next up, we have some bad news from our Fortnite team. We saw Nyx, Blackouts, and Dragons unfortunately not qualify for the DreamHack Anaheim Finals. Best of luck to our Fortnite players next time. Apex Legends? There's something we saw some good results in. PvPX, Cloud9 streamer and YouTuber, finishes in 6th place at the Apex Legends Twitch Rivals. Congratulations to PvPX. In World of Warcraft, Cloud9 was unfortunately eliminated from the Method Mayhem Week 1 finish in NA, and we'll have to see if those boys can turn it around in the World of Warcraft next time. In some good news, finally, Cloud9 took their first win in the Rocket League Championship Series. This win came over Flight, and this might be the start of the Rocket League team turning things around this season. On the Counter-Strike front, Cloud9 has now officially started playing at IEM Katowice, and you couldn't have asked for a tougher opponent when they took on Astralis. And it was an 0-2 defeat for Cloud9, but there ain't no shame in that going up against the best team in the world. Still got a long way to go to prove themselves over in Poland. Now, in League of Legends, probably most of you are here. Twitch Rivals, Team Sneak Dogs, which of course has C9's Banana, and Sneaky, formerly of the Cloud9 LCS team, they finished with a 1-2 record in their first week of Twitch Rivals. But on the LCS front, guess who is 10-0 and undefeated? That is Cloud9, you got it. They got aced for the first time ever this season, and that 10-0 record, well, it's looking mighty good, and especially Niski, who got the MasterCard Player of the Week for this last week of LCS action. Congrats to Big Cloud9 on the LCS wins, and maybe, just maybe, they can go 18-0 in this LCS regular season. Already beat all the teams once. How hard is it to do it again? Well, that's going to be it for this week's Cloud9 Roundup. Hope you enjoyed, and please stick around for the remainder of the 9 Summoning Insight presented by AT&T.
We're back with more than 9 Summoning Insight presented by AT&T. It's that time where we let you think that you're choosing parts of the conversation. So in the spirit of you thinking you have control, we are going to give away Puma gift cards. If you're from NA and you're over 18, here's what we want. We're going to talk about teams. Hashtag Puma and the team that you want us to talk about in the chat, and you have a chance to win. So
remember the hashtag Puma. That's the most important part.
And you can't win.
That, you can't win anything. Exactly.
You can't win without the hashtag Puma. And you also can't win unless you're over 18 and live in North America. We already talked about C9. We're not going to do that.
If you're someone who's eligible to actually play in the LCS, you could win this award. But you probably won't play in the LCS. That's just all imports and, all that sort of thing. But you might win a Puma gift card, so at least you get some out of your League of Legends career. Also, the way we operate this, as Monty alluded to, is the illusion of choice. It's kind of like the American Republic. What we do is you think that you're picking the names that you want to represent you for the show, but we're the Electoral College, and we ultimately decide who actually gets talked about on the show. So hope I haven't just red-pilled the fuck out of everyone who's watching the podcast, but if you look into it a little bit, there was something to what I was saying there, especially for this season of the year.
Guys,
so who are they saying at the moment?
We've already talked about C9, TSM, and 100 Thieves. We sort of talked about G2.
There's a lot of CLG.
Well, God, are we really going to talk about CLG? Come on.
I think.
Come on.
Here's the thing. There's 2 teams in the LCS that we haven't even addressed at all. We haven't even said their name. And they're both mega flawed, in my opinion. But there's interesting angles to them. And those 2 teams are Immortals and Evil Geniuses. Like, there's some teams that are flawed, but in totally different ways. So I feel like there's a lot we could do that. Is there anyone saying that in the chat? See how this works, guys? If you just reinforce what I wanted anyway, again, we're the Electoral College. Like, if you say what I was going to do anyway, we'll pick that choice. So any Puma gift card guys said anything about EGR IMT yet?
They are now.
There we go. Now they know.
You did it.
Now I've just basically shown you. I operated like a opinion poll, told you who to vote for. You voted. Now you get to feel like you're part of it. Like, I'm on team whatever Thorin said. And then now you get to see us talk about one of those teams. So we're going to talk about one of those 2?
Sure. So here's the thing about mid-table teams is they're always the most boring ones to talk about because you can't make as many jokes about them, and they also just kind of suck or have very specific flaws. And that's true in any sport, I think. E.g. Oh, boy.
So I've got a few questions on this one. So LS, we asked you earlier your real opinion on Chovy still in the modern day. Right, I want to know what you think of Jizuke, because everyone in Europe does this over and over again, LS. I'm actually getting sick of it now, where they're like, haha, an LEC player is going to America. He will just smurf on everyone. And I'm like, I'll wait and see. And then I'll just wait and see. And as we've seen, when you go to LCS, you become an LCS player. Like, nobody arrives in LCS intact. They all decay. I'm going to use that new Korean term there. They all become LCS players. So all of a sudden, like Jizuke, who I kind of secretly thought it was possible. He is a really strong mechanical player.
He was good at the start of this.
He's not smurfing on people. He has the odd game that's pretty good, but he's just a player.
I mean, he took over one of the games on LeBlanc early on. But yes, the skill vampires definitely reside in North America, where as soon as you come, they start to leech away your ability to play League of Legends. Unless you're someday. He's got holy water on him or something, or he's covered in garlic. I don't know, but
Holy water, nice.
Got to bring the garlic to avoid the skill vampires, and I'm not sure Jizuke has done that.
Well, Jizuke, before the split, before he ended up on a team, I got actually asked about him by various people. I have no idea how he's an import. I think import generally should be reserved for certain skill levels. And I don't think that he hits that threshold. This is going to be a weird thing because I don't really have very nice things to say. I just,
it's not a requirement, actually.
Stick with your strong suit in. Yeah, keep going.
I know. No,
here's the thing, Alex. At this point in time, what are you going to be? The most loved guy ever? Of course not. So you may as well just go for the most hated. I made this decision a long time ago. I chose my side of the force.
So there's always two sides of something. So I don't want to just cite nepotism or something like that, because I know that that's a thing that runs rampant, right? So fortunately, ProView is a thing.
Oh boy.
So ProView is the thing, and then I think that can give you a much better clue about what's going on with the player than most things, just by being able to watch their camera and how they're playing. So Jizuke, I don't think he's very good at all, and I think the only reason that he's on EG is because of the coach, because they were on a team together a long time ago, and I know that Jizuke made it higher up on the list of if like this person could get certain mid laners. Jizuke was higher on the list than some Korean players like UCal and stuff. So just fuck off. We can't even have a conversation if that's actually going to be a list of like you're going to place him above players like that, because then it just everything just all sort of logic and stuff just goes out the window. You don't know what you're looking at when you're watching the player's camera. You don't even understand what is going on inside of the lane. And so I feel like people that hype him up don't understand mid lane. They don't play mid lane, or they don't know what they're looking at if they do watch his pro view. I don't have this problem. You did this to me, Thorin.
I know I did. All right, what about this then? I'll bounce it onto this. Another reason why, like the fact, like, listen, I didn't expect him to be this bad or this underwhelming, but I definitely didn't think he would be as good as he was in Europe. And the main reason why is Vitality were the most extreme one-dimensional team for the last like 3 years that he played on that team. Like, he was only in it for 2 years or whatever. I might be wrong. Maybe it was 3. However many years he played on that team, right? All they used to do was just like super hard gank around his lane at like level 3 in the game. They even made Mowgli come over and they're like, all right, congratulations, Korean jungler. You're just going to do the same thing as every other jungler does. See this short list here? It's like a little shopping list from mom going to the supermarket. You don't give them too many things. It's only little kids. It's like potatoes, got the bread, milk. Like, he has his 3 things, like level 1, you take your buff. Number 2, you dive on level 3. Like, it's like, if it's that prescripted as to how you're going to play, and then every now and then you have games that you go off. It's like, I'd love to have a game like that if I'm a mid laner. Like, other people have to play the game. They have to play, this game, the jungler's going here instead. This game, my champion's behind. I have to play differently. It's like, someone like him was set up to look bad in this scenario because he had everything going his way before.
Yeah. I mean, I think the whole process of the creation of Evil Geniuses as a team was deeply flawed. I think everything Evil Geniuses has done in terms of their brand has been deeply flawed.
This team in 2020, this team is, and it's not as bad, but it's the equivalent of what Misfits did last year. Where on paper, if I just see the roster and you're going like, I'm going to give you Svenskeren, okay, now we're talking. We get Zazel, he was pretty solid and he's played with Svenskeren. We're going to get Jizuke as a mid, like, yeah, it's not bad. We're going to get you Bang. Obviously, I would go like, fuck it, how was he still stealing shit? But everyone else would go, no, I remember him, he was a good Korean player. And he is pretty good, and obviously if he gets Ezreal every now and then he will smurf, but like, that doesn't sound terrible on paper, but it's not that good in the server. Like, in the server, none of that prestige and hype arrives.
I don't think I've talked to a mid laner that said Jizuke was good.
I think what I know what you're saying, Thorin, but I think that Misfits last year had a much more exciting on-paper roster, and it was much more surprising when it failed ultimately.
It's more extreme, of course, yeah.
The way I look at the Evil Geniuses roster is it's like Jack and the Beanstalk, where he trades everything for magic beans, except it doesn't actually grow a magic
bean. Put it
this
way. When you look at the players they have now,
there is no giant in the Golden Goose. There's just an idiot buying some beans.
They bought Bang, who obviously must have had a fucking huge contract as well. They got Zazel, who was hyped off like obviously the years before when he was in Cloud9. They got Svenskeren, who just came off being MVP. And then they got Jizuke, who's supposed to be one of the better parts of Vitality. That is like, you did just get tricked on every level. Like you bought like a really bad car that actually breaks down. The house you bought, like all the pipes just burst immediately. Your wife is already sleeping with your brother before she even gets married to you. And then finally, your kids just literally turn out to be someone else's. It's like at that point. And then the one thing that wasn't a trick was you've just got Kumo, and I don't even know what Kumo is. That sounds like some sort of disease, like some sort of like acronym for a new disease. Come on, why did everyone skip that part? By the way, when I was saying the rest of the line was good, why were we all pretending this Kumo guy was really good? Like I don't even know who he is. Still, I've watched him play a few. He's okay, just some player in a chair. You know, I know top's not the strongest position in NA, sure, but same.
I just think
Holtz are out there. There's a whole bunch of players out there. Viper's way better.
This is people talk about how the esports industry has stabilized in some way, and
because these are legitimized. All right, you meant stabilized. Right?
Yes, yes, a stable full of donkeys. That's probably more accurate. But it's times like this when you realize how stupid people still are. Like everything about Evil Genius is, if you're gonna rebrand it, just make a new brand. Like the whole appeal of EG is to have that sort of old school style and flair to it. And if you're going to get rid of that, then there's no point in purchasing the brand. If you're going to spend $30 million on a League of Legends slot, and then buy these kind of like players that don't appear to have synergy. These are really suspect purchases, by the way.
These are, I don't know how this team ended up being formed.
Exactly.
Well, the only theory that would make sense is this, LS, is that secretly the owner of Evil Genius is in Kumo and he just wanted to play with all these players. Like, that's the only logical
how did this conversation happen? They're like, would you like a Svenskeren, an MVP Svenskeren, and one slightly used Kumo? Like, what is that?
I remember you talked about this last time during the Nines, during Worlds, right? Talent scouts, they don't exist. Right. I mean, you then use the argument that I exist and I've done this with elite players or something, right? I tried to tell teams, teams that contacted me during the off season, right, about certain players. They didn't listen. It's just it's like bashing my head into a wall. It's like you don't play the game, you don't know what you're looking at, you have no idea what the fuck is going on besides results, and you have a person that actively freelance coaches LCS and LEC players and coach Koreans, plays at fucking master, grandmaster, whatever, career ladder, telling you these players aren't good. And I can break down why they're not good in very small details and whatnot. They just don't listen.
That was how he used to start his pitch. He used to say all of that stuff.
No, but it's insanity to me that the people that are calling the shots don't know what the fuck they're doing.
It wouldn't be egregious. It wouldn't be egregious if we weren't talking about the sums of money that were involved.
Yes, exactly. And in a world where you don't make much back as well, it's not like, like that's the thing, Monty, that I've never understood, right? You know that whole angle people said for years and years about the LCS, which is like, it's just about streaming numbers and Twitter followers and making money. Like that used to make sense when people made money, when companies were run and they were for profit. In the modern era, it doesn't make any sense that you think this is about market. Like you lose money anyway. Like what are you making from the marketing?
Yeah, and I just don't know what Evil
Names
Genius's...
aren't worth it right now. Names are so overvalued.
I don't know what Evil Genius's goal is, because their marketing is poor, their rebrand was poor, they're spending insane amounts of money. Many of the people in their leadership have virtually no experience in esports, and yet there is this entrustment of tens of millions of dollars to them to purchase Counter-Strike and League of Legends and Dota teams. It's baffling to me. Like if you want to make an entrance and say, okay, we want this slot because it's an asset that we believe will appreciate over time. Now debate that, but if you believe that, that's fine. But you don't just go around and you sling all these millions of dollars to make this roster. With the amount of money they have, they could and should have been able to build a much better roster. And instead, yes. I feel like they just got fleeced 6 ways from Sunday at the end. So I don't know. I think heads got a roll for this one, frankly.
When you have insane money and insane budget, there's no reason not to have an insane lineup. Because obviously there are some teams that, even though they're in franchising, they operate on a much lower budget than other teams. Same thing goes for LCK, even though LCK isn't franchised. There is LCK teams that just they can't shell out the same money as certain orgs. And that, I mean, that's also why it's so perplexing to me, like we mentioned earlier about Summit during off season. How do most of the top teams right now in LCK not have a top lane? That's so perplexing to me, because there was also other top laners that were free agents. And we have to wonder if it does have to do with budget or something. So EGs, when you know about the amount of money that they had and the direction that they went, it's just so perplexing.
Yeah, but it's not just this team. It's like the other teams, and
there's
also
other teams too,
and also their branding, and just everything has been done badly. Everything. Like I struggle to think of something in the last year that EG as an org on the whole. I guess the one thing they did was buy NRG's CSGO roster, which was quite good, and they've been delivering results there. But that was also a multi-million-dollar expenditure in order to purchase that roster. And they haven't shown, and at least in that one, I will say, they bought everybody when NRG was like starting to be good, and now they're like a top 3 team in the world. But that was them purchasing something that was already complete. When they had to build something, which was a LoL roster from scratch, even with an enormous budget, they have failed. So I think that's, and they took half of Cloud9's roster, and Cloud9 still came out better. And they took the MVP player. And to me, that's like a titanic misread on how these players' synergy would work, any kind of philosophy for building this roster. So you have to hold people up to the standards to which, they're willing to spend, or they're willing to hold themselves, right? That's why, in my opinion, it was never tragic that Cloud9 wasn't winning versus Liquid, because their budget was like tiny compared to Liquid's. Like Liquid spent money to win, but they did it in a way where they assembled EG spends Liquid money without anywhere close to Liquid results. And jokes about this season aside, I think everybody assumes Liquid's going to get back into form at some point during the summer.
No, LS's analogy is good. Like, basically, Team Liquid is the Yankees. Like, they have to win. They just spend the money to do it. And if you're one of the teams who are like one of the 5th best team, if you win, it's amazing. If you even come second, it's pretty good.
Yeah, that's why the expectations around the Yankees are so high. But even sometimes, a few years ago, like the Kansas City Royals were a championship team, and they are a small market team with no budget, and that's amazing that they managed to do that well. But you don't hold the Kansas City Royals up to the same level that you hold the Red Sox or the Yankees or the Dodgers, because baseball doesn't have a salary cap, so you can just pay people whatever you want. And so big market teams are always going to come out being more dominant on average.
Who were the other teams that the people said in the Puma gift card thing? Were there any other good names they threw up?
Oh, we were
CLG.
Did they say CLG? Because obviously
no,
they did.
That's just
Ellis has
troll.
got some straight fire meme.
All right. Go on your CLG rant.
Okay.
No, well, no. I mean, I'm affiliated with CLG, so that's there you go.
We've all made that mistake at certain points in time.
I'm a streamer.
We've all been
CLG.
there. We've all.
And
been
ironically,
there.
you're the best League of Legends talent in the organization right now. Give me a break. Because here's the thing that's craziest about the CLG one. If we go comparatively, obviously they're not a team that's spending the most. So it's not like we expect the most of them. But if you look what their team was last year and the moves they made, I would never, ever have thought this was even possible how bad their team is now. Like, their roster on paper still doesn't look terrible to me. And they're appalling in the game.
Yeah, their roster is confusing.
I mean, they should be better than EG with this roster.
Yes,
on paper.
And the thing about it is, every single time I watch the coach stream, and I talk to I talk to Twitch chat about like what I think is going on and stuff. It's just so bizarre. They look totally lost. It's like a super solo queue team. It looks like LCS versus dynamic queue. Whenever an opposing team is playing against them, they have the one win, which is, I mean, CLG didn't win, Soraka won. So that says something. And they had the mid lane issue with Crown, and Crown even getting picked up was so bizarre to me. I was very, very vocal about it. when it was first announced. I thought it was a terrible move. And I don't know, people are fucking sweating right now because I was shilling Crown, in 2016, 2017.
What was the reason as to why it was a bad move then?
Oh, he's just he is not the same player anymore. I played against him a few times before I even left for NA, and I remember going over the VODs on stream and being like, I guess I'm LFT. Like, what is going on? How is this person getting an import slot? And it just doesn't make any sense. And then you watch him in LCS, he has no clue what he's doing with the waves. Basic stuff too, right? Before jungler interaction even happens, like wave 1, wave 2, wave 3, wave 4. Things that you can go into co-stream and you can look at. Arbitrary trade timings, random decisions that are just being really weird, standing in wrong places relative to his jungler. Very ABC mid lane stuff that you wouldn't expect him to be making these errors, and he is. And then in later stages of the games, he seems lost, right? Randomly walking too far up inside of lanes relative to what the enemy team's doing, his teammates are doing, etc. And then nothing goes on. And then Ruin looks tilted inside of the games. I know Ruin's getting a lot of flack as well. And then when you have a mid laner that doesn't know what's going on, you have a top laner that's potentially tilted, and then you have a bot lane that doesn't know or doesn't look like they know what's going on in certain matchups, as well as just they're losing sometimes. It's really hard to play jungle. So when you're a jungler and your lanes are all just having really rough issues, you can do one of two things. You can either just do nothing and then just look completely absent inside of the game, or you can try to sin and pop off. And then even if you do, you're still probably going to lose later if your teammates are actually just worse, or if you're playing as a team much worse. Then they bring in Pobelter, and it just feels like their idea of what is wrong inside of the games is just completely false. And then there's also the problems with their drafts, because I've criticized almost every single game I've watched.
Aspect of
the
their
draft.
draft?
Their drafts are. Let me pull up some right now, really quick. I don't know if it's just this. No, wait. Their drafts have so many things that are off theme with each other, like in terms of what the champions are trying to achieve at different points. Their bans are also kind of weird at certain points as well. I mean, they have their one win with Soraka.
God bless.
They do, yeah. They do have their one, yeah. They have that going for them. They've drafted Ornn once. I mean, it's been banned obviously quite a lot. They have the Azir games, but I'm not a very big fan of Azir, to be completely honest. I know that the mid meta is stabilizing with just stat check mages and whatnot, and Azir got a slight buff that I think is pretty negligible in pro play. They're doing a lot of very strange stuff. There was that Nico game. I had no clue what the fuck that was. I think they were even ahead in it at one point. They played Ezreal Yumi. They have a hard on for Aatrox and Set. Ruin's playing that a lot. I don't know what to say. It's just a mess. It's really just a mess.
One thing that I think is really interesting about the jungle right now is I think it's more true than ever that if you lose pressure on the map, then and you get some of your camps taken, it can completely ruin your pathing, and like you can fall behind in levels super easily. So I just want to say, like, about your Wiggly stuff, I think one of the problems that they were having with Crown is, like, Crown would just int in the early game. Like, he'll just flash in lane and, like, all in and lose at level 2 or level 3 very early on into the game. And then what happens is that if you lose control of mid and one of the other lanes is pushing, then you just get all your jungle stolen.
Yes.
And that is just so devastating to junglers right now.
Yes.
That it's very difficult for the jungler to make any kind of recovery.
And the thing about this is also they draft lanes that have to win and don't necessarily outscale their opponents. But the other thing about this is when you draft in this manner, when you draft for lane, you draft for early game, etc. It doesn't matter if you get advantages. Like we've seen it time and time again in this meta. We even saw it at Worlds 2019, that just having slightly more scaling than the opponent, there ends up being breakpoints that exist inside of the game where it just doesn't matter. They have team compositions where their ability to work as a team, as well as just individual skill paired up against some other players inside of the league, is not large enough to overcome the discrepancy that can be present, or to pilot these type of team compositions. Like, I remember one of the things that I think I tweeted about was they drafted a team composition that needed cohesion and teamwork and synergy, which is the exact fucking things that they just lack. They have nothing going on in that regard. And even their team fighting is, I don't know how much you've maybe paid attention to it or something. You want to talk about like hive minds or like operating as one mind. CLG is on all different pages.
Yes. And
that isn't a because Reddit, Twitter, etc., they'll say things like communication issues, right? Communication issues don't register to me as a coach or as someone that's played in scrims or goes into VOD reviews of various players from different LCS, LEC teams, etc. That doesn't make sense, because communication is only necessary when there's gaps between players. Because either you understand what's on the screen and what is necessary and what each teammate has to do, or you don't. And if you don't, it becomes very easy to spot who the person that doesn't realize it is in a VOD review. And if you're saying that you need communication to function, well, no, you fucking don't, because there's so many other teams that exist in the world. The Shy doesn't speak Chinese, right? But he just conveniently, apparently, can operate with all of his teammates, and then people will say that Rookie translates for him or something like that. No, shut up. Like, fuck. I was on BBQ, and two of the players didn't speak a word of English, and apparently they can do stuff together. And obviously, yes, it's Challengers Korea. The skill level of the team is very different, etc. Communication is such a disturbingly misunderstood aspect that you wouldn't say in other games. You wouldn't say that two trading card game players can't sit down and discuss things just by pointing. Right? Like obvious things out, right? You wouldn't say that two people in chess wouldn't be able to communicate just by fucking writing stuff down, like moves, like, A1, B3, etc. Fighting games. I remember one of the arguments that I wanted to make is, so in certain fighting games, there's 2v2, like Super Smash Brothers. You would never say that the top Japanese player or the top, Chinese player or something and the top Western player couldn't 2v2 together. Of course they fucking could. And if they went into a VOD, they'd be able to point out each other's mistakes.
A lot of the terms are the same in terms of, I mean, people know it takes very little learning to understand like words like ult in Korean, or everybody's using the same language of like QWER or flash. I mean, it's like a lot of the same words.
Shut the fuck up when you say communication. You don't know what the hell you're saying. It's so... I want to throw up every time I hear it. God, I hate it so much.
We'll need another break if you have to do that. But in any case, I do think, taking a look at some of these drafts, it's also just weird. Like, I don't even know what the Aatrox was doing in these team compositions the last week, right? Because I look at some of these and I think, well, if we're going to have a Sejuani, Azir, Varus, and Thresh, like they did against their game against FlyQuest, you're playing for kind of you're sort of playing a siege comp at that point, where you want to poke, you want to create zones. If they engage on you, you have a Sejuani ultimate to pull off the disengage. So what is the Aatrox supposed to do here? I would have much rather seen like a GP or something in this composition rather than have the Aatrox, because that actually makes sense. You're basically just saying we are controlling zones. You're playing a zone composition where you play around objectives. But the Aatrox does nothing here.
I think Aatrox does nothing in the majority of cases, to be completely frank. I think that people are thinking that he's a blind pick due to incompetence. Like, for instance, Ornn beats him. But there will be a lot of people that say that he beats Ornn in lane.
Ornn is also banned in these games, for what it's worth.
Ornn is also, Ornn is now a pick ban, basically 100%. So Ornn beats him. Gangplank shits down his throat. That's not even a matchup, but there's going to be people that say that Aatrox can beat Gangplank, even though never in a million years. And then there's other top lane champions that can just neutralize him. And by neutralizing them, you're winning, because Aatrox decays. against the majority of meta team compositions and just also as a champion. Very few times will Aatrox actually go beyond 2 items and conduct himself differently inside of team fights against the majority of team compositions. And so that is just a dead weight that can end up happening. And if he comes in too early in the draft, this is sort of like what we were talking about at the beginning of the show. Aatrox only has one mode. He can only go in. He can only be a frontline. And when that aspect is present, if you start trying to pivot or redirect in the draft to like disengagey, poke, etc., well, what the fuck's your Aatrox doing?
He's also only good in sustained team fights.
Yes.
His power is the longer the team fight goes on, his usefulness increases. Like, it just increases over time because you're banking on the fact that he's going to get, repeated crowd control, that he's going to be sustaining consistently over the course of the fight. So in any poke engagement, you know who's useless? Aatrox. He's useless.
he's terrible in siege scenarios, yeah. And then he can't split push, which is another problem. Like, he doesn't even have that as an outlet. So he's forced to team fight once he gets to 2 items. And there's just so many better top laners in the meta right now that just team fight better than him, that are more worthwhile. Soraka obviously annihilates him. Set beats him. Ornn shits on him. Gangplank beats him. Aurelia beats him. Mordekaiser, I would even say, is more useful than Aatrox in the majority of team compositions. Camille outscales him. He's like losing to everything. But he's like 45-50 against some champions in top. And that, I guess, is comfortable enough for certain people.
I don't know. I'm not a fan. I think it's like one of those champs like Senna, where I think it's more niche than people realize, where I think Aatrox can be good in specific compositions and he can be strong, but he's overplayed in the same way that I think Senna was overplayed into a lot of situations.
Yeah.
People look at her and they think, oh, it's good in lane, but the question is, what does Senna do in terms of sieging or tank busting late game? And the answer is nothing. So
right, she just sustains through.
Right.
Yeah.
One thing that I did want to ask you about, which I thought, because I know you've always had an expertise in itemization, which is the new Senna build. Because I haven't heard a lot of talk about that. Since they changed the we saw Cloud9 run this build. So since they changed it, so now that the support is going to be CSing most of the time, and they changed her passive to where if you don't CS, you get more souls.
Yeah.
I think it's brilliant.
And it can basically, for that particular champion, make it strong as fuck if it gets lit.
Yeah.
It's really so I actually think it started with a Chinese duo. And then Cloud9 was the first to debut.
The other thing to throw in as well is the benefit as well is not even just from that champion. It's that, for example, in that game where it was like Tahm Kench was the one getting all the farm. Now the Tahm Kench is like a super fucking tank from Theory support level. Like,
it's so
that's
funny.
Ridiculous. Yeah.
Dude, I love it because like the spectral sickle, and you're just like, I just think it's so funny because you're farming them with her auto, you're farming them with autos and like taking the exact, and of course pro players were going to be able to abuse this with their level of coordination, but yeah. I thought it was so funny to see Sven and Vulcan do this this last week. I was really enjoying that.
No, I think it's really, really good. I don't know what Riot's response is going to be to stuff like this, I like it.
You know, the Schadenfreude aspect of me, which is a core part of my being, was really enjoying that Riot had attempted to change this into a support and then had like mega failed to do so because it was so easy for the pro players to figure out how they were going to abuse this, and also seeing you know, normally I hate Tahm Kench, but watching him run around with Dead Man's Plate and just be invulnerable was super funny. So
no, I like it a lot. I think that there's other champions that she can obviously be paired with to do this. And so I don't think it's just going to be a Sen and Tom thing. Yes. I think it'll end up evolving. Similar to like Sonatark ended up evolving.
Here's a potentially weird question for you. Do you think this could result in like potentially double AD carries in the bottom lane? Like what happens if you pair it with another AD carry? and then you start playing tanks on other parts of the map.
Yeah, I think something like that could end up happening for sure. I think it would just depend on who the AD carry is, but I think if we're talking about double AD carry, I think that it has to come in as a response.
Or
it
an
can't
AP
be a proactive
carry.
pick. Yeah, AP carry as well. Like,
Probably would be the better example.
Yeah. So I think in that regard, it has to come in as likely a counter. It can't be proactive unless the AP carry obviously has flex potency. But regardless, I just think that I think that Senna in that aspect is stronger than AD carry Senna any day of the week.
What about unconventional tank supports?
Like, I'm a very big fan of Zach, because Zach, when he ends up getting items, when he gets the new Sunfire Cape, when he gets Leandre's Torment, Zach is disgusting. Zach is really, really powerful. Maokai is really, really powerful. Cho'Gath is really powerful. If Senna hits your snare, it's all over. So I'm a very big fan of them even before Senna, but support players globally are worse than AD carry players were globally when it came to playing mages.
Mm-hmm.
So like there were ADCs around the planet, or whatever, that couldn't play mages in the ADC role, but the ones that could obviously made them work, and there was value there. Support players are even worse than that. Because most support players are considerably worse at playing mages or anything than like your mid laner. And so I feel like one of the reasons that we're seeing these fucking Braum, Nautilus, Tom, etc. picks over and over and over and over is the players aren't going to play the mages or the more difficult champions as good as, say, their mid laner would. And so it poses a problem where how unconventional can we really get with support picks? And then what is the amount of, what percentage of support players can actually play those champions?
Yeah, I think this is like a really, I'm super hoping that we don't see this nerfed soon, because I just want to see what players are going to come up with as weird supports to play with Senna under this circumstance, because it's so specific in the way that this can work. And I think it opens up a lot of really cool opportunities to get a lot of money on a kind of weird support. I think Maokai and Zach are really interesting examples, because if they get items, the amount that they can affect a team fight later on is just ridiculous. So I think it's fun. I'm intrigued to see where it goes.
The other thing about Maokai, Zach, Cho'Gath, champions like that, their items also cost less than some mage items or some AD carries. Like, a lot of their items are very cheap, and the recipe components for them are also very cheap, which means that they have impact and more relevancy than needing to wait on the full completion of an item. And I think that's really nice, especially because these champions can be flexed. So there's a lot of power as well.
Being as you said earlier, like you implied it there, like you had a tweet, I've just found it now while you were talking, where you said support players globally are allergic to playing mages in order to severely punish Tarm, Braum, Nautilus, blind picks, right? Give us the premise there. What's the story on that?
So champions like Braum and Tom and Nautilus and Thresh and these other champions.
It does puzzle me how ubiquitous Braum has been for the last year and a half or something.
It's like, fucking insane.
Still being picked like in pro play.
Right. So obviously mages can just shit on them. And the argument is that if the mage gets caught once, the lane ends. And that obviously if the mage falls behind, they're less relevant than a tank who they're being picked usually for a couple of reasons that doesn't pertain to items. But mages need items, mages need to scale, and yada, yada, yada. And so there's this fear where if they die once, they're just going to be useless and irrelevant. But not all mage supports are going to be like that. But I also just think that's one of the most asinine counter arguments that could ever possibly exist, because you could make the same fucking argument in mid or top lane. Like, I just can't pick a mage because if I fall behind or if I get ganked, then everything's just going to be a problem. No, you Dulce, can you fucking learn how to play the lane so that you can achieve both without falling behind? And it's so perplexing because it just seems like no one wants to try, or the teammates won't want to let the support try. And that's just bizarre to me as well. I don't know how much deeper I can really go without like talking about like personal experiences or like other stuff. I know that in like November and December, we actually had a lot of stream scrims because we were. I was trying to bring a random roster of Koreans and Malice to play in TCS, as well as try to qualify for Challengers Korea, and we ended up not being able to do it. But on my Twitch channel, there were scrimmed games against LCK teams, LPL teams, Southeast Asia teams, etc.
Whatever it used to be.
Challengers Korea. Okay, our players are not as good as some of the players that we were playing against. And the drafts for the enemy teams started devolving to, they would ban Ornn, they'd ban Gangplank, they'd ban Zyra, they'd ban Vel'Koz, they'd ban, because we would just send Selfie bot lane with Autumn, and we would just double mage if they wanted to try to blind Tom and Braum. And they would hug their turret like their mother's breast, and they'd lose it every single game at 7 minutes, and they would try to gank the double mages. And if Malice is doing his job, or if the mid laner warded, maybe Wraiths at the right time, or they warded bot at the right time, you can't actually approach them. But it's a thinner line to walk, and there's a higher reward. So it was really funny to me, and I tried to keep referencing it through December and even in January. Look at these VODs. They're on Twitch. You recognize these players. They play in the LCK. They're starting to ban these mage supports, or they stopped blinding Tom and Braum against us. And they won't pick it themselves, which was fucking weird. It was so strange that they wouldn't draft it themselves. They also wouldn't draft Akali against us before banning Draven, because we would just send Draven to match Akali everywhere. And then Akali can't play the game, and Draven would just be super fed, and then you can't approach him. He'd 1v2 you. And I know that these sound like very surface level explanations, but it's like, holy shit, just fucking think. But I think that people are so afraid to go out of their comfort zone or be asked to walk a thinner line in exchange for a greater reward.
So to tie this all back together, LS, with your concept of sinners and saints. So you are aware of, so this is gonna get a little weird. Do you know Gnosticism, which is the mystic tradition of Christianity, in the same way that like Kabbalah is the mystic tradition of Judaism, or Sufism is of Islam? So in Gnosticism, they have a very different approach to things, which is that original sin and eating from the apple of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil is the act that gave people consciousness. Okay. So the idea is that original sin is wrapped up in the essence of being human, because you wouldn't be self-aware without having created that sin. So
you have to have a choice to be able to sin. If you have to choose it, but it doesn't just happen by default.
Okay. But the whole idea is that it requires the knowledge of good and evil and the ability to be self-aware. So you have to sin in order to gain self-awareness. Yeah, I feel like this Gnostic concept plays very nicely into what you're saying, which is that in order to actually begin to think for yourself, you must have consumed the fruit of sin to begin with.
Yeah, you have to start with these champions.
Yes,
you have to go into the water, and getting people to go into the water is the hardest step. I remember Misfortune.
Be baptized in your sin. Yeah, keep working with this metaphor.
I was telling Ellie, so this was during the off season, or actually it was during Worlds too, right? I would be talking to like LEC 80 carries and be like, Misfortune's actually sick right now. Like, you should play MF. All of them were like, no, like Misfortune can't be good, or MF isn't really good. Now we know that that's not the case. But even something which is now a mainstay, Ornn is another big one. I was shilling Ornn for the last 10 months. I was saying Ornn was the best top laner in the game. Nothing has changed with Ornn. He last got a buff, I think, in April 2019.
Are you an Ornn jungle enthusiast as well?
Ornn is... Why would you pick Sejuani when you can pick Ornn?
It's true. I mean, I'm not arguing.
It doesn't make any fucking sense.
I mean, the answer is like, I have a curious question for you. So then, when would you put him in the jungle, considering that he will reach his levels where he can actually upgrade items slower than a solo lane?
So I feel like that's one of the misconceptions, is that he reaches it slower. Ornn is almost able to keep up with Karthus.
Really?
As a tank jungler, that's unholy. That is absolutely unholy, because he never has to recall.
What's your build on that?
Cinderhulk. So right now you do Sunfire first and then Cinderhulk, so that you get the immolate from Sunfire. I believe that's how it works. I might be wrong. I might be a complete idiot. at the time of recording this, and someone in chat's gonna be like, "Fucking Ellis doesn't know what he's talking about." Remember that time he said Janair would beat G2, you know, and then they'd be like, "He cheated in Brood War."
Okay. Yes. So I love that. You just just air the list of LS grievances yourself. You just defang all of the people trying to attack you immediately.
Do you know Shrimp? Do you know Shrimp, the jungler?
Yes.
Yeah.
He's actually
the Gravity
on,
jungler. Yes.
Here, I'll link this. Oh no, it was on Gravity. He was on
No, I'm saying he was.
Oh yeah, okay.
It was on that St. Vicious team, yeah.
Yeah. He's spamming him a lot in Korean solo queue right now. I'll link his OPGG in Twitch chat for people. But he's spamming Ornn a lot. I know Malice was spamming it a lot. We tried to talk to some Korean junglers about him as well, and they just won't pick him. He takes time getting used to. You also have to play around Ornn. You have to be willing to not fight. Do you know what I mean? Like, he needs time to come online.
Got it.
His ganks are insane because he ganks you from 2 screens away. So that's pretty insane. And then because he's able to keep up with once he has ult, right? Yeah. He ganks you from 2 screens. And because he has Spellbook, he has access to other things that other junglers don't. But because of Ornn's passive, the natural resistances that he gets, he's tankier than Aftershock junglers without Aftershock, which is just stupid. It's just so fucking stupid. But he doesn't fall behind the way that people would think that he can. Like Karthus versus Sejuani, Karthus versus Zac, Karthus can 3-level them pretty easily if the laners are doing their job and Karthus is doing his job. I think traditionally he'll 2-level them, but he can 3 and 4-level them. Ornn can keep up with Karthus, which is nuts. But I feel like people won't even try to go and play him inside of the jungle. And
they almost tragically, they almost certainly won't before he gets nerfed, because you got to feel that's right. Coming.
And the nerf is actually going to hit him in a little bit harder because he won't be able to gift a teammate until never mind. That's not public yet.
That's also why, by the way, that's also why I can't believe how that there was like an aversion to that champion for the last year. Because at the end of the day, even if that champion itself was bad, as long as it survives, it literally upgrades your fucking mid laner's death cap. Like, how is no one else seeing this? Like, if that's even vaguely viable,
so
you think it's spammed all the time.
Ornn basically gives you 3 items when you have 2, depending on what item he's upgrading. That's so insane. Death Cap, obviously, is super insane. Sunfire Cape, super insane. Abyssal Mask, super insane, especially because there's so many magic damage dealers in the meta. You can even have tank junglers go Abyssal Mask. Well, if we're talking about Ornn jungle, the nice thing there is that you get access to different types of champion pools if he's inside of the jungle. But he clears so fast. He's very tanky, very durable. Never recalls, so he acts as a living ward, so that's really good for laners that fucking suck. So because he's always just running around the map doing something, because honey fruits are basically objectives to Ornn jungle, so that he doesn't have to recall.
I mean,
nice.
Sounds super cool. I'm just, like I said, I'm sad because I think the
I
nerfs are obviously predictable coming in because of how dominant he is in the professional scene. And I don't think we're going to see teams get, because the thing about pro teams is like something can be good. We've talked about this before. It wasn't that Soraka was changed. It's that it takes time for teams to recognize it. And then there's also the learning curve that you have to get over of playing it properly to realize how strong it is, because you're going to suck with it at first, most likely.
Yes.
And it's going to be not ideal. And you will have a teams will have a perception of, oh, we lost this scrim with this champion, even though the player playing it might not be comfortable, or it requires a different way for the team to play. And scaling junglers require the team to play very differently, generally speaking. Like if you're going to take the Ornn or the Karthus, everyone on the team has to understand how that's going to operate. And so for it to be strong takes a lot of coordination and a lot of practice. And that is the sort of, it takes a while to get there, and I don't think we're ever going to get there because I imagine no team is really practicing this, and especially when you know nerfs are coming, there's no point in practicing it, so...
I don't know about that. I hate that angle where people always say that, like, oh, the champion's going to be nerfed in a month, then win the games for the next month and learn the next ones. Well, isn't your job pro gamer?
But here's the thing. I would agree with that if Ornn was not already being played, but he is. So teams are going to say, well, we can play him and win in mid or top, and so we'll just do that. But I do agree.
I think just having
in
access to the
principle, I
pivot.
agree with you. But I think in this case,
Yeah.
it's not like there's a choice of playing Ornn jungle or nothing. They're
Right.
already flexing Ornn into 2 different lanes.
Yep. So you have to be able to abuse the flex into jungle as well as find spots where it's worthwhile. But I think that is good because the champions that people will take to counter Ornn in top lane, they have very hard counters. And so if the person drafts thinking that it's Ornn top, or they draft thinking that it's Ornn top mid, and they draft their top laner and mid laner accordingly, and then you throw them jungle and get a really strong counter in mid or top, that can be really good. Especially if Ornn has a good matchup against enemy jungle as well as just against the enemy team.
Just end on that note.
We just end there, I guess. Well, yes. Thank you very much for coming on, LS. I know you had to wake up at 3 a.m. for this, which is impressive, and you're sick. So thanks a lot for being willing to come on the show. It's been great. Good discussion. Yeah. Thanks to our gift card winner, Actually is Andy, I guess. I think that's a typo that I received. And thanks to Puma, Microsoft, AT&T. See you same time next week, 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Central European time. Until then, go watch LS's stream. He's really good at co-streaming. And give him your Twitch primes. Thanks, guys.